Hello, okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Lord, we are here, meeting here today to conduct matters of business, guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may be
Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Salazar, are there any corrections to the agenda?
Mayor, we do not.
Do we have any staff communications on items of community interest?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Thank you very much. We'll move to item number 1, receive and file Montebello Bus Lines' comprehensive operations analysis, final report, and authorize staff to begin implementation of the plan. Do we have a presentation?
Yes, Mayor, we do. I'd like to introduce Adriana Kendricks, the Director of Transportation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kendricks.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the council. As you can see, we have brought transportation staff, our operations department, part of the operations department. But to bring to you tonight is the line-by-line analysis with the COA. What is the COA? COA is a line-by-line analysis. As developments are...
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. As developments and improvements are happening in the cities of the service communities that we serve, traffic patterns change. So with those traffic patterns that change, the COA needs to happen. To be clear, this has all begun with research, gathering data, public, employee, and stakeholder participation. A plan of training will be provided a minimum of 3 hours to all of our bus operators if this plan is implemented of the proposed changes. And what are those proposed changes? One of them being the line 10 going to Cal State Los Angeles. The other one is the line 50-55 split. Currently our line 50, it's about 2 hours, one loop. One loop, that bus operator is sitting there in the seat for 2 hours. So we're proposing to split that line 50 into the line 50-55, and you will see that in the presentation. So with all this having to, with the presentation that we'll bring to you, one thing to keep in mind is that we have the World Cup 2026, and we have the Olympics coming in 2028. So with that, I'll bring you to Alfredo Manchuca. That is our transit planner, and he'll be giving you the presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the council. My name is Alfredo Machuca. I'm the transit planner for Montebello Bus Lines. Before you is a brief presentation of what Montebello Bus Lines is, a few insights on our system, some funding, and some proposed route geometry changes. And a little fun fact for you, that picture is taken at the Rio Hondo spreading grounds, and that's looking into Montebello. Let's see. The system overview, Montebello Bus Lines fixed route operations consist of 8 bus lines, 7 being local and 1 being an express. Out of those 7, 5 of those bus lines run through major thoroughfares that not just connect our city, but the county. Those are Whittier Boulevard and Atlantic Boulevard for line 10, Greenwood Avenue and Montebello Boulevard for line 20. Line 30 services Olive Garfield Avenue. Line 40 services Beverly Boulevard, well into downtown Los Angeles. And line 50 services Washington Boulevard. 2 of our local routes consist of 2 circulars, line 60 being a circular for the city of Pico Rivera, and line 70 being a circular for the city of Montebello. We also have 1 route that serves as an express from Taylor Ranch all the way to downtown LA via the 60. On the right-hand side of the presentation before you is a system map, so you could better kind of get a grasp of the region we serve. A little introduction to our funding sources. Montebello Bus Lines receives federal, state, and local funds to cover both capital and operating expenses. We also do collect fares, in which go back into expenses that are expended by Montebello Bus Lines through the Transit Fund. Federal financial assistance is usually brought before through FTA 5307 formula funding. State financial assistance primarily comes from the Transportation Development Act of 1971. And local funding is received from voter-approved Measure R, Measure M, Proposition A, and Proposition C. The graphic on your right-hand side is one of our capital improvements, and that is the redesign for the buses, so the rewrap. Fare box recovery and fare structure. Montebello Bus Lines collects fares in order to be able to fund its operations. But there's a little bit more to that. The Transportation Development Act of 1971 requires that recipients of state funding be able to recover at least 20% of their total operating expenses through passenger fares. Fare increases to the system would position Montebello Bus Lines to be consistent not only to other agencies near us, but it would help ensure that Montebello Bus Lines keeps on meeting that TDA requirement as required by public utility law. For fare structure and recovery continued, we do have a big major player which also serves as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, that's Metro. They've recently introduced a fare capping program that is where truly the people who are the most transit dependent benefit. The more you use transit, the cheaper it becomes. After a certain amount of times you tap into the system, the cheaper it does become. That's what their agency is trying, at least for us specifically. 70% of our riders use cash, so it would be very hard to implement considering that it would be technology-based and people would have to use a tap card. But however, we do participate in regional programs that try to make it a lot easier to access and a lot cheaper to be able to use our system. We do participate in LIFE, which stands for Low Income Fare is Easy, the Go Pass, the U Pass, and the Easy Transit Pass. Low Income Fare is Easy program provides riders with 20 regional rides for free. So your 21st are for free. If you do want to get a pass, say a monthly pass or an Easy Transit Pass, they also give you a discount for it, and we will honor those discounts. On the right-hand side, there is a table of those discounts and the first 20 fares for free. The Go Pass allows K through 12 students from participating school districts to use our systems for free as well. The Easy Transit Pass program provides a multi-operator pass throughout the region that we do participate in. So if someone were to buy an Easy Transit Pass, riders with Easy Transit Passes are also able to use our system as well. And the U-Pass allows college students from participating universities to use our transit system for free as well. On your right-hand side, on top, you also have some examples. The U-Pass, typically for their student ID, it's a little sticker with an RFID transponder, and they just stick it on their student ID. The Go Pass, I believe, it's a dedicated tap card, and the Easy Transit Pass comes in different ways. One being a sticker onto a regular tap card. Sometimes they provide them a dedicated tap card as well. The proposed Line 10 extension recommends extending our current terminus at East Los Angeles College to Cal State LA. That would provide Montebello residents and surrounding community residents a one bus ride all the way to a four-year institution. And that's big because we're not just serving the community college. A lot of people go to community colleges to get their associates for transfer, but they have to transfer somewhere, of course. So we want to continue that kind of guide and then go into Cal State LA. So from ELAC, they could keep on going into Cal State LA. It's one bus, and it would be from their community, which is Montebello. Metro has already allowed Montebello to take over Bay 3 at the Cal State LA Transit Center. So if we were to move forward with the Line 10 extension, Metro is completely okay with it as well. And then here we have one of our buses with a Cal State LA head sign and one of our analysts as well. Line 10 would continue via Avenida Cesar Chavez westbound and then would go up northbound towards Eastern until they hit the university. Operators will have access to the restrooms at the transit center, which are dedicated restrooms for operators. And Montebello bus lines will be serving the communities of the northern portion of East Los Angeles, as well as City Terrace, which allows them to come into our communities as well. So it goes both ways. We go into their communities, but they're also able to come to us with a one bus ride. For one of the proposed changes is the line 50-55. So line 50 would be split into two. line 50 going from downtown LA to Montebello, and line 55 going from Montebello to La Mirada. The layover would be at the Montebello Metrolink station, which is very nice because it provides a multimodal approach towards transit. Not only is this just bus, but now you have regional rail played into this as well. There's some pros and there's one challenge, but that challenge has been resolved and we'll go over them right now. The pros, it provides a regional connectivity, not just within our system, but it opens up the doors for our riders to be able to take Metro 18 and Metro 66 into Koreatown. So that's one of the options. It does provide a safe place for passengers to transfer with included shelter, bench amenities, and a security guard. I've ridden transit myself. Nobody wants to be at a bus stop when it rains, and there's shelters at the bus bays, so that's definitely a nice amenity. There have been no vehicular accidents within the property, which makes it a pretty safe place for not only our buses to lay over, but our patrons to be there as well. It provides regional connectivity to the downtown LA/Inland Empire areas through the Riverside line that Metrolink provides, and beyond by connecting riders to Union Station and really taking advantage of Metrolink's regional rail system. Potential for more revenue from Montebello Bus Lines Line 55 because now we have people coming in that have Metro 18 and Metro 66 as an option as well. So we're collecting that initial fare regardless, and on top of that, we could even be issuing that interagency transfer and collect revenue from that. It does not cut off Montebello residents from Line 55. At one point, it was an option to start Line 55 from Pico Rivera, but bringing Line 55 into Montebello serves the Montebello community as well. And there's a dedicated restroom for operators to use as well. And it's not shared. They would have a key and they would be able to use that. One of the challenges is that we only have one bay technically at Montebello Metrolink Station. So the worry was that we might have two buses at the same time laying over. That has been fixed through our scheduling software. So the buses would be coming in a way where they're not double laying over. So it'll be a stream of buses, but they won't be double laid over. Aside from that, I do want to mention that our line 70 does connect to Montebello Metrolink as well. That would be the Montebello bus line 50 split at the Metrolink layover. Before you is the route geometry as a whole. If you can tell, the route hasn't changed. The only thing that changes is the layover at Montebello Metrolink Station, and that is accessed through Garfield Avenue and then right on Flotilla going northbound, or left on Flotilla if you're going southbound, which we already serve through line 30. Greater access. So this gives a better visual of what I meant by more lines servicing that area, but just by us coming in, on your left-hand side, we have line 50, line 55, and line 70 servicing that bay, but once we really tie it in together, you have line 18 from Metro and line 66 as well. Not only that, I was hoping that you could see the Montebello Metrolink station there as well, so it really gives a multimodal approach. You don't just have to take line 70 to catch the train, you could take line 50 or line 55. Here is a TIMS analysis. So the UC Berkeley has a repository of all traffic accidents, pedestrian accidents, cycling accidents that happen within the state of California. So I've provided a visual for you where there have been no accidents, both vehicular, pedestrian, or cycling within the property, which kind of makes it a really nice place for people to be laying over. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? I'd be happy to take them if.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Mayor, I'm sorry. We
sure.
also have a second
Yes.
presentation that dives into some of that
Right.
other details. So it would be okay if we did the second presentation by not
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm sure I messed up the vendor name, but they're here and they're the ones.
Mr. Peter with Nelson and Nygaard will now be presenting.
This vendor did the in-depth analysis on the COA, so he's got a very short presentation. I think that will help better understand how we decided to go this route.
Very good, thank you.
Hi, good evening. Peter Soderberg. I'm a senior associate with Nelson Nygaard Consulting Associates. We're a transportation planning firm. and I'm the Deputy Project Manager for the Montebello Moves Comprehensive Operational Analysis. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm here to present some of the kind of background, the process behind the Comprehensive Operational Analysis, delve into what some of the project goals and specific tasks were, identify some of our key findings, both from our existing conditions evaluation as well as through public outreach, and then highlight some of our key recommendations as a result of the study. So first I want to start off by discussing, what is a comprehensive operational analysis and what were some of the specific goals we had for this project? So a comprehensive operational analysis, or a COA as we like to call it, is something that transit agencies typically do every few years to really evaluate how their current system is performing, as well as identify, any strengths, opportunities for improvement, any specific community needs that they can incorporate to make sure that they optimize existing service and establish a roadmap for expanding service into the future to continue meeting the needs of the community. So our key goals really start by evaluating the existing service, again, identifying the strengths of the operations currently, as well as any opportunities for improvement. Next is actively and consistently engaging with members of the community, including transit riders, non-transit riders within the community, regional partners, and other stakeholders throughout the community to understand what their priorities and needs are. If people ride transit, why do they ride? What do they need to make their system better? And if people don't ride transit, what are certain things that may make them more likely to ride in the future? And lastly, using both of those first goals as key inputs, we developed some specific implementable recommendations in order to optimize the existing service, as well as, again, like I said, create that roadmap for future service expansion. So next I want to run through some of the specific tasks and the schedule associated with Montebello Moves. Typically, COAs can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to complete, depending on the size of the agency, the specific scope of work and tasks involved, as well as any other outstanding circumstances. So in this case, we had a project kickoff back in the summer of 2021. From there, like I mentioned on the previous slide, moved through our existing conditions and operational analysis, conducted an onboard rider survey to really fully understand the existing characteristics of current ridership, as well as what their priorities for service improvements in the future are. Not only did we reach out to existing riders through an onboard survey, but we also looked at several virtual community surveys, as well as town halls, stakeholder interviews, pop-up outreach, and operator outreach to get a full, robust understanding of not just current transit riders, but the entire community's perspective. We then wrapped up these findings in an existing conditions report, and from there moved on to develop preliminary service concepts. Once we had these concepts, we then went back out to the public to vet them with the community and see what do you like about certain scenarios and what don't you like. So we can take some of those key, strongest, highest preferred options and create one set of service recommendations that we then took back out to the public for a final round of outreach just to confirm what we were proposing still aligned with their needs. And then we had a couple of additional supporting tasks, including a fare analysis where we evaluated the performance of the existing MBL fare structure, conducted a peer review to identify what similarly sized agencies in the region were doing with their fare structure, created a preferred alternative for a modified fare scenario that simplifies the fare structure, better aligns with peer agencies, and looks at reducing the administrative burden for Montebello Bus Line staff. Lastly, we looked at some supporting capital recommendations, including looking at a transit hub or a mobility hub in certain areas of the city to, again, improve the operator layover facilities, get better access to restrooms, as well as improving customer amenities and making sure that people have a safe space to wait for buses and make transfers. So with all that really setting the background for what we were looking at as a part of this project, next I'll walk through some of the key findings from our existing conditions evaluation. The first of our findings is that MBL really provides extensive coverage within the region. Most municipal transit agencies really focus their service on smaller streets, specifically within their city limits, but MBL is really unique in the region in that routes operate much further outside of the boundaries, all the way to downtown Los Angeles, Whittier, La Mirada, as far north as Alhambra. And all of these routes really cross through the city at some point, but do have that large regional focus. Again, like it was mentioned earlier, Line 50 is a very long route. Round trip, it's about 50 miles, 4 hours to drive from end to end and back again, which we also noted does have some on-time performance and reliability concerns associated with it. This is one of the lowest on-time performance routes in the system, meaning that effectively as you're driving, for example, down through downtown Los Angeles and along Washington Boulevard, any delays from traffic congestion there can cascade through the remainder of the route, resulting in on-time performance concerns. Additionally, Line 60 and 70 are some of those smaller, more circulator routes, but it's also worth pointing out that Line 60 is a relatively low ridership route that does not intersect with the city of Montebello at all. It's completely outside of the city, and it is unique from that perspective. Next, as I mentioned, this project kicked off in the summer of 2021 while we were still kind of in the middle of feeling the immediate impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So like almost all agencies across the country, ridership fell off a cliff right at the beginning of 2020 and has since been continuing to climb since. So while ridership is still not back where it was pre-pandemic, we have continued to see a positive trend in this direction as we've moved through the project process. On the topic of ridership, we also looked at performance of individual routes and found that lines 10 and lines 40 are really the highest performing routes in the system by far. These two lines have the highest frequency in the system, about 15 to 20 minutes all day for line 10, and during the peak period for line 40, which then dips down to a bit lower frequency outside of the peak period. But between these two routes, they account for about 70% of all MBL ridership. Beyond that, lines 20, 30, and 50, the other more long-distance regional routes, are notably lower ridership, but are still higher than the more circulator local routes, line 60, 70, and the limited service express route that only runs about 5 trips per day around the peak periods. So really we're seeing the highest ridership service on those main key corridors, much lower ridership in terms of local circulation. Next, it shouldn't necessarily be a surprise given the large regional nature of the MBL system, but during our onboard survey, we asked residents to respond with what locations they live in and found that only about 24% of existing riders live within Montebello. The rest of the riders are really dispersed throughout the region with a relatively high proportion in Whittier, some in East Los Angeles, Pico Rivera, Boyle Heights, as well as other smaller cities within the region and some areas of unincorporated Los Angeles County. This really goes to show that MBL is important not just for the residents of Montebello, but for meeting regional transportation needs. And this helped us inform potential recommendations for expanding to new regional destinations to continue meeting this need. And lastly, as a part of our outreach to both riders as well as operators, we found that there would likely be some benefit from investing in a transit hub within the city that, again, has more opportunities for restroom access, safe spaces to wait for the bus, and to make a transfer. So with all that kind of wrapping up the key findings from our existing conditions evaluation, I also want to make sure I touch on what specific activities we engaged in for community outreach and what some of our key findings were for that. So like I mentioned previously, we had several rounds of community outreach where we used a number of different approaches. We began the project with an onboard survey that received over 700 unique responses. So this was surveying individual riders who were actively riding the bus at the time of the survey, so we could get a better understanding of what their perspective was, what the demographic makeup of existing riders is, their ridership behavior, what specific priorities they have, and how satisfied they are with certain elements of existing service. In addition to the onboard survey, we had several community surveys that were, again, online surveys that were available to transit riders as well as non-riders alike that gave us a better perspective about what their priorities were for transit service. Once we had preliminary recommendations, we used the similar survey approach to identify what their perspectives were on those recommendations so that we could incorporate any of that feedback into a preferred alternative. We also developed a project website that would house information on the project, links to draft documents, links to surveys, links to virtual town halls that we also ran as a part of this project. We advertised for the surveying efforts via the city and MBL's social media channels, as well as through physical copies of flyers posted on the buses, recognizing that not everyone's as technologically savvy as some people, may not be active on social media, so making sure that we were able to advertise to a diverse, broad spectrum within the community. We also held several rounds of stakeholder interviews where we met with local employment areas like the shops at Montebello, Beverly Hospital, different departments within the city. We met with other regional partners, including the city of Whittier, as well as several other transit agencies within the area. We also included presentations to 2 different LA Metro service councils for the San Gabriel Valley as well as for Gateway Cities, so that we could present our specific recommendations to LA Metro as well as the other operating agencies within the area, give them a chance to weigh in on our recommendations, let us know if anything needed adjusting or would work with them. And as a result of that, we generally received support for some of the regional extensions and did not hear any concerns about duplicative service or encroaching outside of the Montebello area. The last piece on here I'd like to touch on is pop-up events, recognizing that particularly post-pandemic, not many people can attend or are interested in attending virtual town halls or public meetings. So we took an approach of actually meeting people where they were and hosted 3 different pop-up events at the city's centennial anniversary celebration, at the shops at Montebello, and at East LA College, where we could present information on the project, show people what we were looking at, show off our recommendations, and actively solicit feedback from people where they were. So as a result of all of this outreach, generally what we found from the onboard survey was that most current riders are generally satisfied with service. About 60 to 70% of current MBL riders did express overall satisfaction with service, but there were a few opportunities for improvement. Most notably, looking at higher frequency service, that would be having buses come more often. Days of operation, noting that currently line 50 doesn't operate on Sundays, line 60 and 70 don't operate on weekdays at all. So looking at making the service more robust, meeting more trip needs, particularly on weekends. Looking at new areas to serve, some specific examples that came up during outreach were Cal State Los Angeles and the South Pasadena Gold Line Station. Looking at expanded hours of service, particularly on line 10, which came up in public comments a fair amount, knowing that some people don't necessarily work typical 9-to-5 jobs. They may be working shifts or late night service and need to get off, they get off work at a certain time, need to have that late night access back to get home. And lastly, looking at schedule reliability. This was something that existing riders expressed a lot of dissatisfaction for compared to the other components. So again, this relates back to the line 50 being a relatively low on-time performance route compared to the other lines within the system, really representing an opportunity to look at how we could improve reliability for that route so that the bus shows up on time when it's supposed to. A lot of this feedback that we received from existing riders was echoed during our community stakeholder interviews, particularly the need for later evening service as well as more weekend service. And again, like I mentioned, the regional partners during the Service Council presentations were generally supportive of the regional expansions that we had proposed. So with all that really showing, the technical analysis takeaways from our existing conditions report, as well as the key findings from stakeholder outreach, next I'll just walk through at a high level what the actual recommendations were within the final report. So first we'll start with the specific line modifications that, a lot of this was just presented, but first, looking at extending line 10 further north and east to Cal State LA, extending line 30 further north to the South Pasadena Gold Line Station, and again, splitting line 50 into 2 lines, the 50 and the 55, which again is done for several reasons. First, to look at improving on-time performance and reliability by shortening the route, improving layover opportunities for operators so that they no longer have to take such a long drive without being able to get a break and have some layover. And also noting that in the existing conditions evaluation, we found that there was generally higher ridership on the western portion of the route. And what this means is by splitting it into 2, it gives more flexibility for MBL in the future to look at making different tweaks to frequency or service span on each of those segments independently. So that if demand continues to increase in the western section, you could improve that service without necessarily needing to improve it for the lower demand section as well, which may be more efficient in future planning. Additionally, we looked at shortening line 55, so it would no longer operate all the way south in La Mirada, but would instead stop at Imperial Highway. This is something that we heard during community outreach. There was not a lot of support for continued service there. It's a relatively low ridership segment of the existing line, and would enable us to provide resources for some of the other improvements. Similarly, line 60 was also a very low ridership route, not operating within the city of Montebello. And an additional analysis shown that its ridership has really been decreasing steadily since 2017. It was suspended during the pandemic, was brought back, and ridership has continued to lag behind the recovery seen by other routes. So next we'll go to some of the specific scheduling upgrades. So first, looking at increasing frequency on lines 20 and 30 to every 30 minutes. Right now, they operate about every 40 to 60 minutes, sometimes a little bit off headway. So by moving to 30-minute service frequency, it accomplishes 2 things. It both, having the route come more often makes it more convenient for passengers, and coming at even 30-minute increments makes it easier to understand. So you don't need to worry about every 40 minutes, 45 minutes, just every half hour, it'll be there. Next, adding Sunday service to lines 50 and 55. Again, this was a common theme that we heard in public outreach. And noting that, again, not everyone works typical 9 to 5, Monday to Friday jobs, but expanding weekend service really makes Montebello bus lines a more useful service for different trip types. Similarly, adding weekend service to line 70 for the same reasons as 50 and 55. And lastly, upgrading lines 10 and 40 to consistent 15-minute service throughout the day, recognizing these are really the core high ridership lines within the system, fully investing in those to support the level of demand that is out there. So with that in mind, we do have a couple of additional recommendations. The first is considering creating a transit hub or a mobility hub somewhere within the city. The report identifies a few different locations, one of which is shown here in Greenwood and Washington, but there's some other options available within the report. This, again, we've covered this relatively extensively at this point, but does create improved opportunities for transfers, waiting amenities, and operator relief areas. And lastly, considering minor modifications within the MBL fare policy as described in the final report. So we don't have the numbers shown in here specifically, but what we found in that analysis was a few things. So first, Montebello Bus Line's current fare for a single trip is $1.10. Generally, it's best practices in the industry to have kind of increments of 25 cents. So right now, a cash payer would be fishing for nickels and dimes to actually pay that fare. Whereas if you go to a quarter, it makes it easier to pay. There's less administrative burden on the staff side to sort through all of that change. It ends up being a simpler process. The next point we note is that many of the other peer agencies charge a reduced rate for a transfer. It's typically you pay your fare once and then you pay 50 cents to make a transfer within the agency, whereas Montebello Bus Lines charges the full fare to make a transfer. So the next component of that recommendation was to adopt a similar policy so that you would have no longer the full fare to make a transfer, but that reduced rate in line with other peer agencies in the region. Lastly, we looked at going fare-free for youth service, which again is something that is gaining a lot of momentum within the area as well as across the country through that Go Pass program. So this is something that would also reduce some administrative burden for agency staff, noting that there's two different discount policies in place right now. One level for the federally required seniors and people with disabilities, and then a different level of discount for student fares. All of that requires administrative work on the back end, and by going fare-free, it reduces some of that burden. So in course with this fare structure evaluation, we did model out what we expect those impacts to be and would anticipate from implementing that fare structure about a 3% increase in ridership, about 51,000 additional riders based on the numbers we evaluated, and a decrease of about $54,000 per year, about a 3 to 4% loss in revenue. So relatively small in terms of overall percentages from the agency's ridership and operating perspective. So that really concludes the formal presentation. Happy to answer any questions about the process of the report, the key findings, any of the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soderberg. I think at this time, Ms. Guillen, we do have public comment, right?
Yes, that's correct. We have two speakers.
So let's hear those comments first, and then we'll move to council for questions and comments. Thank you, Mr. Soderberg. Appreciate the presentation.
Can we switch over to the timer, please? The first speaker is Will Severa.
How are you doing, Council? Will Severa, longtime resident. Really good explanation, very thorough. I just have a couple of questions. The gentleman was mentioning about Metro, how they were paying, and I believe he said something along the lines of a paying option. So is it kind of like a tap to pay option, or is it just a card where they just reads it? And would we be able to implement that into the city of Montebello, tap to pay option, if that's the case? If most people carry cash, I know I personally always use a card, I don't use cash. The other question I would have is for the line 10 for the additional going to Cal State LA for the Route 10, how much additional driving time is that going to be per side? So if you're heading from Montebello to Cal State LA or Cal State LA to Montebello, how much additional driving time would that be? And the other one is, with the new scheduling on trying to make the trips for 20 to 30 minutes, would we be able to do that currently with the staff? Or would we need to hire additional staff so we can have enough turnaround? Or would this also affect the equipment, whether we have enough buses to actually hit that route for 30 minutes round trip or waiting there. And one question would be is, I believe back in the day, they did do some type of a program where you were able to track the buses. And I think that was supposed to be maybe 2016, where I believe that they did it because people were missing the buses, so they couldn't tell if they were on time or late or if they missed it. And I don't know if that's still implemented. By any chance, would you guys know? So, okay. So that sounds like, since you guys are going more technological, like maybe we could put that into the My Montebello app, and then this way you can do your bus transits, or when he was saying you could pay, maybe that would be an option just to add it into there so people could pay for their option. And if they can do a scan, you can just do it like you're going to Starbucks and just show your code, and it's going to take the money out, and then the city still gets their money. Thank you.
The next speaker is Cecilia Lopez.
Hi, good evening. I live here in Montebello. I'm also a resident, union representative, but I'm here as a union rep concerned. This is the first time I'm hearing about this presentation because I've been bringing up these issues of asking for what's going on with our bid and our scheduling. And I asked, this was in March, and we're barely hearing about this now. My concerns of safety were still being brought up still in 2 weeks ago. I did bring up to the attention to management about this presentation was totally different than what was told to me. For them, the 10 line, again, we're not here to contest us moving forward, moving into the future, extending the lines or nothing like that. Because of anything I've talked about since we became unionized in 2012, we've asked for extending, even raising the fares, which that should have been implemented since over 4 years ago, about the $1.25 the adults, because yes, it's easier for them to hold a quarter than 10 cents, because I'm also an operator, so I know what goes on. Title VI protects them, so we told them, hey, just leave the seniors and disabled at 50 cents, but the students, put them at $1. They put $1 anyways. The adults put them at $1.25, and the express, I'm sorry for the express passengers, $1.75 if you guys want to go to that fare. Also, we haven't had any transfers for years. So I don't know what the gentleman was speaking about having transfers and paying that additional $1.10 unless they buy a day pass, which is also very reasonable, $3. They're going to be boarding all day. My concern was about the 10 line extension going to Cal State because there's a sinkhole. So there's a safety concern for my membership. You just can't come and put asphalt there to for us not to go, to go in and us be protected. No, you have to go in there and do a whole, construction to, fix that sinkhole. My other concern was also on the 50. They keep talking about the 50 is a long ride, but they don't, none of them drive the 50 line. I drive the 50 line. Why? I used to before I got placed on administrative leave. So no, it's not long. It's something that we do, we get used to. It's a beautiful long line. Yes, you have your moments of not having some of the passengers, but still, it's a beautiful line. And when they talk about performance, it's all on the bus operator because we're professional. So you can't handle traffic, detours, you get the 88 customers, that's out of your control. So when they talk about performance, all that's part of your workplace. My concern is going into the 55. When I spoke to management, they told me that they were gonna turn, the 50 was going to turn into the 50. Sorry. Sorry.
Ms. Lopez, it sounds like you're not quite done with your comments there. I'll entertain a motion from one of my colleagues to extend your time for a minute so you can conclude your comments.
I motion to extend time to a minute.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
And by voice vote, if you're in favor, please say aye.
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 And hearing a unanimous consent, you can continue for 1
Oh my
minute.
gosh, I thank you all. Okay, and I'm sorry, I didn't even say good evening. Sorry, I'm just a little anxious right now because none of this, again, was not presented to us prior. And I've been pushing again since March. So the line 55 that was brought up to my attention, they said we were gonna turn in from the 50, it was going to convert into the 55. We were going to stop midway on Commonwealth and Washington, tell our customers, mind you, we don't short manpower. So sometimes the customers, right now, the line runs between 30 to 45 minutes because of the short of the manpower. Sometimes they're waiting for an hour plus. So for them to be there waiting for us and then us converting into the 55, then coming and tell them, okay, I'm sorry, now we're converting to the 55. You guys have to get off the bus. We're gonna pull the bus over, secure our bus, put our four ways, tell our customers to get off the bus. And then to add to insult to injury, tell them, okay, 3, 4, 5 minutes already passed, now we're gonna tell them to board the bus again, but before you board, you have to pay your fare again. To me, that was not, it's not good. Another, again, I'm not here to contest about moving forward and extending and changing the routes, but this puts the membership at risk of assaults and being attacked. Again, the passengers are there waiting for an X amount of time. Thank you for your time. Just please, a safety concern for our membership. Supervisors are not always there for us, especially the security guard that they just hired. Thank you.
That concludes all our speakers.
Thank you for the comments and the presentations. We will go down the line. Councilmember Melendez, any questions or comments?
Thank you. Thank you for both presentations. I serve on the San Gabriel Valley Metro Service Council, so I did see the presentation, and I do concur that regionally there was a lot of support from a lot of the members. And thank you for that. Thank you for the outreach efforts. My question, in regards to the fare capping system, does that also apply to us here?
No, it does not. Just like the Metro brought Go Pass, it was under the pilot program, and other munis were not allowed to participate until they were finished. And so that is just the same as what it is right now with the fare capping program.
Got it. Thank you. And then just a quick comment. The Cal State LA route, I think it's great to be able to provide that service to. I think it's the closest, probably four-year university in Montebello. When I was going to Cal State LA, I wished it would have been there and would have taken advantage of it. But I think it's great, not just for the students, but also for the workforce. There's a lot of folks there that work, so I think it does provide that opportunity. And just the last comment, does any of this impact any of the workforce, any changes in?
It would extend the route about 15, 20 minutes, but what was unmentioned is that it gives a perfect place for a layover for operators to use the bathroom and have access to be able to stretch their legs. It adds about 15, 20 minutes to the route. However, not all, it's kind of explained this before when we are doing the run cutting. You build out each route, you fill out your headways, and then once you put it all together, then you begin with the packaging. Well, the packaging is the building of what each operator bids on. And so an operator can have that choice to say, well, I want to bid on a package that has overtime, or I choose not to.
Okay. Yeah, just thank you again. I know this is extensive work, a lot of analysis, a lot of information. We'll always take all the information, so appreciate everybody's work.
Councilmember Tamayo?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It was definitely very comprehensive. I know you touched on a couple of issues on how we need to get more ridership on these bus lines and how we provide regional coverage, including other neighboring cities. I know we're looking at these numbers. It includes the pandemic, so that's part of my question, or maybe a concern that if these numbers are low, it could be the effects of the pandemic. We talked about the line that was going to be cut for Pico Rivera, but yet we had the pie chart that showed that Pico Rivera is 10% of the ridership. So, you know, that's a big impact. Also, we had received strong opposition from Pico Rivera to cut their line, so I don't know if that was ever addressed or what happened with that. So I'm in agreement to extend the line to Cal State LA. I think that's a great a great addition, but I do have the concerns of the elimination of the 60 line and also the split of the 50-55. So it is the case that they would have to get off and pay a new fare?
And,
Maybe we can
really-
answer some of those questions, because I think if not, that's just going to be an ongoing thing. We can address the 60 right now. We can talk a little bit about the actual split, what that actually
Okay.
is, that might help with eliminating some of the concerns, if you don't mind, Mayor.
And really quickly, Councilmember Tamayo, do you have more questions still?
That was it.
Okay,
Those are
because we've had a couple questions from the community in comments and then a couple questions up here. So if staff and Nielsen Nygaard, whoever's most appropriate would like to answer, what we've heard so far, we'll take a pause and allow you guys that second there.
So let's talk about what that's going to be.
Definitely. So regarding the line 50-55 split, there was a safety concern regarding the passengers, having to get off and on and continue within the same bus, more or less. That was a concern because the lines were going to be interlined. What does that mean? It means that one bus with one head sign travels one way, changes head sign, continues on. So it gives the appearance as if you have to get off and on again and pay double fare. This has been fixed by having it at the Metrolink station. The lines will no longer be interlined. What does that mean? That line 55 goes from La Mirada, comes up to Montebello, and heads back to La Mirada. It does not continue on to downtown LA. Same thing with line 50. From downtown LA, line 50 comes down to Montebello and turns back to downtown LA. It does not continue forward.
There are two different drivers. It's not the
Correct.
same driver.
Two different drivers, two different packages when work is presented. Okay.
Can we get the presentation on the screen?
Were there any other questions on the line 50-55 split? Did that address the comments from?
So is that a double fare?
Yes. Yes.
So, and I guess I apologize for repeating, but currently this line operates from La Mirada to downtown Los Angeles as a single line, splitting it into, so now those riders will have to pay fares for both lines. And I think during the presentation, we talked about possibly doing a reduced fare. But I also believe that there was a comment from the public stating that we currently don't charge transfers. If that can be.
So we don't charge line-to-line transfers because we don't offer them. That's the thing. We offer day passes. They're pretty cheap to buy, and then that gives you limited access to the day. So there would never really be a need for transfers. But I believe what's proposed is that we would start offering line-to-line transfers.
So the riders who are used to being charged $1.10 or $2.20 for a round trip will now be, if they're taking advantage of the day pass, would now be paying $3 for that same trip, because otherwise you'd be paying $1.10 per each line, right? Going and
Right,
coming back.
and with the proposed fare recommendation, it would go from $1.10 to $1.25, and then that transfer would be 50 cents. So it would go from $2.20 to $1.75 in that case.
And round trip, that would still be capped at the $3 for the day pass, right?
We do offer tap cards. We do use that.
We do offer tap cards, however, as mentioned earlier, a lot of our consumers do pay cash, 70% do, so we always offer paper alternatives, just in case they don't have a tap card.
I would like to add, in addition to that, with the study that we have, we serve communities that are stuck with the cash. They don't want to give up the cash for some reason. They're just most comfortable with the cash. Our bus tokens, Metro reached out recently and said, hey, Montebello Bus Lines, you guys are still using tokens. Absolutely, because our communities are still, they like the tokens. They like to be able to buy tokens in bulk and use those tokens. So we still utilize tokens as well.
I believe Councilmember Tamayo had a few other questions that I don't think we've quite addressed yet. And I guess I should say before we continue on, if there was anything else on that topic. Not yet, okay.
Yes, I believe one of the questions was the opposition to the 60, the discontinuation of the 60.
Yeah, I can add, we did an additional round of public outreach regarding that service change. We hosted an additional public virtual town hall, as well as a survey to continue gauging perceptions of that service change. Did not receive as many responses to that as we had for other engagement efforts, which we took to mean not as significantly negative outreach associated with that. Though we did hear from members of the community on that as well. I'll leave it to staff if there's anything else to add there.
Yeah, if you could characterize that a little bit more, because the letter that was sent to us by the city of Pico Rivera was pretty strongly worded in terms of their feelings that misrepresentations were made on the public process, that there was significant community input after they understood that the line was being taken away as opposed to being merged, I believe, like with line 70. So if you can kind of like characterize, since we've received that letter, you know, what steps we've taken. I believe there's also a question of federal regulations and issues of equity and one of the titles there.
Right. So I guess to recap, the recommendations brought before you are the ones in the COA. However, not all of them will be implemented. And the first one that I would be saying is that line 60 will not be discontinued. That is to just inform you, and you are correct. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1962 prohibits the discrimination of race, color, national origin. Part of that is conducting equity analysis. However, we will not be discontinuing line 60.
Councilmember Tamayo, did you have other questions?
Those were all my questions. Thank you.
And Mayor, I'd just like to add on that line 60, even though the ridership has been historically low the last 5 or 6 years, considering the letter, there's some other things that we're working with their school districts to increase the ridership, and that would be something we will continue to look like in the future. As part of our compromise with them, we extended our opportunities to continue this ridership with the knowledge on both sides of the city's borders that the city of Montebello's system is not subsidized by Pico Rivera. It's an internal system that at some point we would be extending beyond Pico Rivera, because that right now it just circulates in Pico Rivera. So essentially, we're like a contractor for them. So I think we came to a consensus that there is some ridership, that they would work towards helping increasing that ridership to qualify us to continue to have that program. So it is one of those lines that we do subsidize. So I want to make that very clear, that we did take into consideration all the letters, all the conversations we had with the superintendent's office. So we jointly agreed that we would work towards helping increasing that ridership. But we would certainly be looking back probably in the next 3 or 4 years post-COVID, hopefully with some of their increased marketing, that we would hopefully see some increases in those numbers.
Thank you very much, Ms. Salazar. Some of the other questions that I was able to catch, and if the public, if I don't catch all of them, the public's welcome to just clarify the comments that they made. But from one of our public comments, line 10, going to Cal State LA, I believe there was a question as to how much additional ride time.
Again, yes, 15, 20 minutes,
That was
but they
15,
have the
20 minutes.
option to bid.
And there was a question about staffing and how it affects equipment.
It's the same.
The proposed changes.
It's the same.
Let's see. And I believe, and I think that's all the questions that I noted down.
There was a comment, Mayor, made about some road improvements that were necessary for the Cal State Landing Transit Center, and I believe staff has already been in communication with Cal State Los Angeles to make sure that the roads there are in the best conditions before we start our service there.
Okay.
The sinkhole is being addressed, yes.
Okay. great, thank you. Moving down the order here, Mayor Pro Tem Peralta.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for both presentations, giving us an insight. Some of these presentations can be multiple hundred pages long, and so having a presentation to go along with is very helpful. And just to clarify for the extension of the Cal State LA line, I think this is a real great service to be provided. We have a lot of students. Cal State LA is a commuter school. And being able to have our students and workforce reach that area at a low cost is extremely important and of a priority. And just to kind of clarify in regards to the safety hazard that currently is there, will this line be put on hold until the safety measures are resolved, or are we currently working? We're currently working with Cal State LA in regards to getting these safety hazards resolved prior to the bidding of this specific line?
So again, the sinkhole is being addressed, but please understand that Metro, Cal State LA, they would never put anybody in harm. It's liabilities. Nobody wants to pay that bill of liabilities. So they are taking the measurable actions in place to fix the sinkhole, but in essence, right now, buses that do go in there, they're being rerouted to a temporary layover. We would not be going until the job is complete.
Perfect, I appreciate that. And then just kind of echoing the same sentiment about line 60, I do appreciate the fact that we are working towards increasing ridership and finding an alternative to continuing that line versus discontinuing it. At the end of the day, it does service a lot of students in the area. And so figuring out a way that Montebello can work with PICO and potentially increasing that ridership or extending it beyond PICO to service others, I think is a really great alternative. In regards to the increase in frequency on weekdays, our region does suffer from heavy congestion and traffic. How would increasing shorter time frequencies on these weekdays affect our drivers? And do we currently have that driver capacity to increase the frequency times?
So with that, you would have to look at it where it's commuter traffic and where you increase that frequency, and then that will be resolved with the scheduling software that we have and in accordance. So scheduling software, you have to manipulate it, and you have to, once you learn the algorithm and once it understands what you're trying to do, we will get there. But at this time, at this moment, not everything in the COA is in phases. We're not asking to throw in the kitchen sink at one time. It would have to be done in phases in accordance with the manpower of what we have.
Okay, thank you. Just a general comment to that is I do understand the importance of increasing the frequencies for our residents, also being sensitive that it's not at the burden of our drivers who do have to sit through that heavy traffic and really meet those shorter frequency times. In regards to the mobility hubs, I think that's a great initiative that currently we're lacking in regards to the amenity that they provide. I did see in the presentation there was one specific one that was being recommended, as well as others. In general, will we be coming back to this as well to talk about just the amenities that will be provided and then the cost that will be associated at a later time?
So to answer to that, yes, the COA is just one of many things that we have to do. I know someone mentioned the fare box. We have to visit that, and we have to do an analysis of our fare box. After the COA is complete, then we will start and dig into our bus stop improvement project, because that is another, I actually brought a bus sign. It doesn't say where we're going. And this is part where the COA connects the bus stop improvement project. It doesn't have a line number, doesn't say what direction we're going. We have folks that come out of town, they call customer service, they're frustrated. And they are just like, I'm here at bus stop 511, but we don't have a bus route 511. It's just an informational line. So there are many more projects to come at Montebello Bus Lines.
Great, thank you. I think that's extremely exciting to see. just the ways that the city is trying to improve fares, improve routes, as well as the amenities being provided. Regarding the just overall restructuring and the introduction of these new transit routes, can you please provide just a general understanding of what training measures will be implemented for drivers to ensure that their proficiency and safety is met in light of these changes?
Absolutely. So it would be it will be required for bus operators at minimum of 3 hours for proficiency. And with that 3 hours of proficiency, it gives the operator that moment of being comfortable with that route. But a minimum of 3 hours is what is required.
Okay, thank you. And let me just make sure I have.
I just want to be clear, Mayor Pro Tem, that these lines for the most part already exist, and we're just expanding some of those. So we're not introducing any additional substantive lines. Eventually, at some point, we'd like to get into Long Beach if we could and go further north. That would be our ideal. So this is just the base, and then we'll keep growing. And again, it would help if we can increase our ridership post-COVID. So these are all just, the major lines when to allow us to continue to connect and build our amenities platform, which is partly, adding more benches, shade structures, and things like that. Once these routes are kind of established in that phase, then that would be the next one, is to add route-based amenities.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And at this moment, that concludes my comments.
Councilmember Jimenez.
Thank you for your presentations. I am really excited about just starting with the mobility hubs, but line 10, line 30, line 50, because I previously did ride this blue bus line forever and ever before I had children, and now I'm trying to get them, encourage them to figure out a way to get to school, because they go to school all the way in Pasadena. So driving out there every day. So I see the South Pasadena stop, and it's very exciting for me. Now, being that we live in a county with nearly 10 million people, and I take a lot of pride in knowing that we're the third largest transportation system in the county. And it's really nice to see, again, these lines being extended. The ease of our commute to residents that live outside of the area to come into Montebello, the accessibility, the economic growth that, we know that during COVID, a lot of our businesses suffered, and I'm very grateful that we had the team that we have that made sure that our lines, our bus lines, I think, again, considering everything that was happening, did their best to thrive during that time as best as they could. Now, I know that we have some employees here, and understanding that, while they might be a little stressed out or frustrated or anxious about the extension of these lines, I'm very confident that, knowing that our team is a highly professional, skilled team, that you would look into making sure and provide these safety measures, ensuring the transportation workforce is provided with safety. Safety and their labor breaks is as crucial for their well-being as it is for the functioning of the transportation system overall. And I think that by prioritizing their safety, of course, and their well-being, we create a more sustainable and efficient transportation system now by allowing them and making sure that they have, their union, we have represented employees here, and I can't imagine that our staff and our team wouldn't work to make sure that all of their needs are met as things change. We provide these safety measures and guidelines, and again, be in compliance with labor, state, and federal laws to make sure that, again, it goes full circle.
It does. It really does. And just to echo a lot of what you're saying, I was once a bus operator. I know what it's like. I know the pressure. I know what it's like of being out there and driving a bus. But at the same time, we are also working really hard with the recruitment where we are looking to hire Class C, not commercial operators. We're looking to train brand-new bus operators. So what one expert can do of 20 years of driving, I cannot put that pressure onto a new bus operator. Training is essential. It's very important that they receive that.
And I've seen this again with this team, Adrienne, if I may, where I think that our mental health for all employees is extremely important. Now, driving is a very fatiguing task, and I'm sure it could be. We know that it can be very stressful because you never know who's going to hop on your next ride. So I'm sure that the levels of stress that they endure again, are considered as you move forward into creating these extensions and, again, providing new opportunities for our community, for people that haven't been able to, again, there are people that don't drive. My mom didn't drive until 5 years ago, and this is one of the reasons why we learned how to take the bus, that they're now able to go a little further. Now we have this line going into not only to Cal State LA, but LA Trade Tech. So this is really nice that we're figuring out a way to move into the 21st century. So thank you.
So first of all, just thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I know this was brought forward at the end of June, and we asked for a little bit more information and to bring all the different stakeholders in just to really spend time here. And already we're about an hour and 10 minutes in, so it's like just talking about like how, how significant our transit department is to the city and how extensive the operations you guys look over and the lines that we run. I appreciate the process going through all of this. The Montebello Moves effort took place over a long time. There was a lot of community engagement, a lot of outreach, and a lot of effort put into it, and to receive data where we could start building these things out. With that said, I do have a few questions. So first of all, I guess I'm just curious, like, what additional approvals are needed to implement these plans? Because as specific as these details are, it does feel at the same time that they're still kind of very high level in terms of regulatory requirements, talking to other, getting approvals from like federal and state agencies, any kind of budget amendments or fiscal allocations that council needs to be aware of. Can you talk a little bit about like what the implementation of these 4 phases would look like through the process?
So as a transit agency, we are required to have public communications in every language in all the communities that we serve. So that is the requirement. You just can't stop and land and go. And a COA is just what it is. It's a working plan. But we need something to start with. We need a base. And with that working plan, one of the plan recommendations in the phases is the line 10 extension and the 50-55 line split.
Mayor, I think your question is more along the lines of what's the next step beyond, say, for example, council approving this, right? So as mentioned earlier, we have, as an agency, already spent time with this plan, sent it to all the other agencies that we need to receive review with. That's already been done with. We've already made sure that Metro understands that we're not taking other lines. We're complementary to some of their lines, which is how we ended up with the Cal State line. So in that respect, we've already hit all of those other approvals, if you will. Moving forward, as mentioned by Adriana and team, there will be some other capital outlays later on, and that really has to do with the amenities. That's the bus stops, that's kind of another phase that would be secondary. But as far as we're concerned, this has already been vetted through Metro and all the other regulatory agencies. So outside of this process, and then the rollout with the bids, which is more along the line of the staffing operations, there's really no other layers we need to do because we've made all the amendments or to pretty much everything to make this a go.
Okay, thank you very much for describing that. Uh, I am still unclear if the discussions around equipment and personnel were around just line 10, but looking through the changes through all 4 phases, particularly the reductions in the time that it takes for buses to come around, I'm sorry, the word left me. But just to be clear, that's not going to require any extra equipment or personnel to reduce
No.
those times along the route?
So each route, again, they're packaged, and then it goes in accordance of bids. And once you get lower into your run cut, you have confetti on the wall, and then you build them, and you're starting to build the package. What you will find is that some operators work from anywhere from 36 to 43 hours a week. So if those packages are at 36, then they move closer to 40 hours.
So in having more frequent stops, going from 30 minutes or 40 minutes per stop down to 15 minutes, that we're still able to keep the same personnel and the same
Absolutely.
structure?
Yes, yes. It's ultimately up to the driver if they prefer, if they want to take on that package or not take on that package.
Can you describe that a little bit more?
So if I drive the line 10 and I see that we're going to Cal State LA, and I know now if I normally drive that route and it's going to extend 15, 20 minutes longer, then it's up to me to say, well, this package has the line 10. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to Cal State LA. And so they have the options of bidding on other package that doesn't have the line 10 in it.
I'm not sure if that speaks directly, though, to decreasing the frequency of the buses.
Are we talking about manpower, or are we talking about frequency?
About the frequency of the routes. So, for example, Phase 4 service recommendations, upgrading line 40 to 15-minute frequency on weekdays, upgrading line 70 to 30-minute frequency on weekdays. In Phase 3, also we see 15-minute and 30-minute frequencies for lines 10, 50, and 55.
So these phases will not be implemented until we have the manpower. I would never put operators in a position to do that, where it's almost asking like you're gonna cook Thanksgiving dinner and you don't have the chefs to make the food. So I would never implement something like that if we're not there yet.
So these phases that change the frequency and the days on which these buses run would require more manpower and equipment eventually, at one point?
Eventually, at one
Okay.
point.
And I guess that's where, in talking about this plan, like and I understand that this is still very preliminary, like we haven't quite gotten to that point yet, but I don't see the kind of like accompanying analysis of, because if part of the recommendations here are to approve this plan, but along with this plan, we don't see the numbers that are attached to like what the additional service personnel is going to require, what the extra wear and tear on the buses is going to be, what that means for maintenance. Like, it seems to be that there's a little bit of a chain of events that happens once this starts to be implemented down the line. And again, just kind of like going off of like what the recommendations are and the approvals, I guess that information is missing here. I don't know if you guys have that somewhere kind of like in your files in arranging these plans.
So Mayor, I think I understand what you're saying. You're talking about the budget. How much per year is it going to cost us to increase? So because this is a multi-phase project, that gets built out year over year over year. And so because it's over time, there's not something, like for example, in today's budget that was just approved last month, we are only projecting what we know we're capable of doing as far as line expansion, the number of actual employees that we have budgeted, so we can only do so much within that budget. Now, year 2, which would be next year, let's just say we can, go 3 or 4 more blocks. I'm making that up. I'm just saying extending the line a little bit. Then you would build those costs into next year's projected budget. And so again, we didn't go into this into too much detail, but there's revenue miles. A lot of our funding comes anytime you increase our revenue miles, you actually get paid more through national transportation data. I mean, we could get super technical. I didn't really want to get too complicated that way, but that's really how the city ends up recovering those dollars eventually exponentially over time. But this is not, we're not going to implement this next year. This is multi-phased, and every year, as we will come back to council and ask for additional appropriations if it's necessary mid-year. But historically, transit operates kind of a year out just because of the way that these routes are bid packaged, if you will. So that's why it's not attached to this, because today the budget it was approved this last month already speaks to us just even having this conversation.
Right. Okay. I understand. And that's very helpful. I guess, like approving this plan and laying it out, there's some hesitancy there. If we're talking about things that are like much further down the line, but we don't quite know what our capacity is going to be at that point, it feels a little bit premature to, like, let's say like phase 4, right, which might not be implemented for several years, to say at this point, like, yeah, the council, at that time should take on this project because reduced frequency, being able to get to your destination on time or to have more choices. Like, I'm absolutely in favor of that. As someone that rode the bus for 4 years, I've experienced what it means to have an hour delay or to like miss your bus by like literally as you're running up to the stop to see it drive away to wait for 45 minutes. I've felt that pain. But at the same time, just being realistic with what resources we have to be able to accomplish these plans. I just like to really be.
And that's where the bus stop improvement project comes in, because now we have some data. Now we have an analysis of our operations, and that is something that is shared when we deploy the bus stop improvement project. So that everything just kind of works together.
Right. Another question. So reading through the report, it seems like maybe there were 2 major periods where there was like data and feedback that was received. 2021 seems to kind of be like where the surveys were conducted, and in 2022, you see a lot of community engagement and rider feedback. I was just wondering if the information that we gathered has been updated since 2021, how ridership has changed since gathering the data, and if other agencies are relying on data gathered during the peak of the pandemic to modify their schedules and their operations.
Yeah, so a lot of this is just dependent on, when projects kick off. Generally, projects that have started, right after the pandemic have relied on that pandemic era data, just given that the landscape of transit ridership and travel behaviors are shifting, and that this represents kind of the most accurate piece that we have at that time. So we have continued to monitor overall ridership trends from MBL throughout the course of the project, just to make sure that our underlying assumptions are still accurate. But a lot of that analysis that happened back at the beginning of the project in summer and the fall of 2021 is based on a more detailed package of data that it's a little too cumbersome to pull that level of data every single time to reevaluate. So we do have that more focused, detailed analysis there, and then continue to monitor the overall trends to ensure consistency.
And how often does that monitoring take place?
Generally, you can pull data either monthly or quarterly. So as it's been available, we've been trying to keep things updated.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
But to your point, Mayor, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify also, we also have day-to-day data as well, which is part of what we send every week in the communique. So staff can pull real data on a daily basis per route. So we also, we use some of that other data to really support some of these expansion routes as well.
Thank you. I have 2 more questions here. One, if the fare projections, so there was 6 different options that were presented, 5 or 6 different options that were presented for various scenarios on how we implement our fares. Do the projections take into account the changes in the system, or are those numbers based off of our current operations?
Those are based off of current operations.
Okay, and are there projections for each of the various scenarios in terms of these various phases?
There are not. It's generally very difficult to project ridership for areas that aren't currently served by that system. There's a lot of different factors that could play into that. So typically for this level of fare analysis, that's based on current ridership patterns, not taking into account any of the potential service changes.
Thank you. And then if one more time you can just address some of the safety concerns that we've heard. Also, as a rider, I was actually a witness in one instance where one of our drivers was assaulted. And I've seen that firsthand, so I know that, as much as we care for our bus operators and we don't want anything to happen, at the same time, they don't quite have maybe some of the measures that we've seen in other transit systems or some of those tools. So if you could just kind of talk about that again.
So again, it goes back to training, and training is essential. Even for the 15, 20 minutes that we are going to extend with the line 10. And again, to Arlene's point, that these are routes that operators are already familiarized with, but that 15, 20 minutes is now with a 3-hour mandation of behind-the-wheel training.
And further, Mayor, we most recently brought to council an award to bid for on-bus security guards, which we've added. Both on the line system, off the line system. We have onboard live video. So we've added a lot of those additional real-time, security measures. There's always room for improvement. We're always looking for ways to ensure safety. So if there's other, recommendations, we'd certainly like to look at that. But those are some of the most immediate things that we have done. And then safety also has to do with rider fatigue. So we always want to be sensitive to that as well.
Got it. Thank you very much.
And also, in Alfredo's slides, he did show how Metrolink is the ideal place to have a layover. We have a security booth there. It's an open area, and that is where operators essentially, as we know, real estate is hard to come by. I've asked Mr. Palombi, can you find me 5 acres? That's a challenge. But we do have Metrolink, and that's where building the team and looking and identifying, okay, we don't have 5 acres, but we do have Metrolink. And that's where, essentially, where we're looking to have that. But also, too, it's closer to the yard, and it has a faster response time with having local Montebello PD. We have our security. So all of that is really thought out.
Understood. Thank you very much. To conclude my comments, and thank you very much for entertaining my questions and for providing the extra context and information. Again, just to repeat, going down the recommendations, some of the measures here seem a little premature in terms of doing the modifications to certain line increases and even when it comes to, I believe, the location of the mobility hub. There we go. I see that there's like a few different recommendations, and of course, myself being very partial to the Metro Gold Line project that's coming in Washington and Greenwood seems like an ideal place, but I don't want to assume on behalf of my colleagues or preempt that conversation. But I think in general, as a receive and file, and just kind of like continuing to work, understanding that we're continuing to work in this direction, but there's still, I think, a long way to go in like really understanding like what the implementation is going to look like exactly. I think that council, needs to take our time here. I just received another speaker card, and Ms. Beatrice Vasquez. And that concludes my comments. So we'll move to the speaker here and then move it to council decision.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and all councilmen. I have a couple of questions. For us as smart TD leaders, I think this is a great idea. Expanding and getting more and getting bigger, I think it's a great idea. The only problem we have is a safety concern, not that we oppose of anything, but safety. Right now, we don't have the manpower to do all this. Drivers don't have leaders, drivers don't have followers, drivers are getting assaulted. So by extending all this with the drivers and the manpower that we have, how do we do the safety? Because we don't have it. Now, my other question on this is the relief point on the 50. It was brought up to us that the relief point was gonna be in the middle of the street of Washington Boulevard. So that's a major. I don't know if that's going to be, because they didn't talk about that right now, but my question is where the relief point was going to be for the line 50 and the 55. I know the layover is at the Metro, but the point is the relief. I know they do all these presentations and all this, and it's great because there's a lot of stuff that not even us know, but one question, they do all these presentations, but they never ask the actual operators that do these lines. Drivers are gonna be sitting on the bus seats for more hours. It's summertime. Sometimes, the mechanics, we don't have the manpower for even service workers. There's days that we have 3 to 4 service workers servicing 40, 50 buses. Like, we don't have that manpower. So this is great, but at the same time, I wish they would look at the safety for all our bus operators, assaults, layovers, where the relief points are gonna be for this, and the manpower to cover all this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vasquez. If staff would like to respond to some of those questions.
We have several different measures in play. I'm hearing, safety is a continuing issue. That's something we're currently addressing. Driver fatigue, overall assaults, all those types of things. That's, unfortunately part of general transit operations. That's what's been happening. The nation, you hear it in Metro. We've been very aggressive working with our local police department, again, spending millions of dollars on real bus cameras, et cetera. So we hear that. We're very well aware of those concerns. Again, this is a plan very similar to a park master plan. It's something that you grow over time. You continue to, when you have the ability to do it, we would certainly expand it. I want to be very sensitive to not approving a plan, because then we're essentially dead in the water, and then we would essentially just be where we're at now. And so I want to be very sensitive to, if that's the direction of council, then our system would remain as it is, because the longer we wait to approve a plan, then we'd almost have to restart again, because that data that you mentioned, it was acquired during COVID time. We used historical data. There was a lot of data sets involved in this. So if that's the direction of council, at this point, it would be something that we'd have to consider moving forward. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Salazar. And as to the question regarding the exchange point,
yes, the layover is going to be at the Metrolink, the Montebello Metrolink. So that is the layover. That is going to be the relief point as well. So operators that are driving that route, it's the end of their shift and they finish their run, another operator, employee is coming out there in a relief vehicle to take over from them at that location.
thank you very much. So with the presentation, comments, and questions that we received, I will now open it up for a motion by the council.
I'll make the motion.
There is a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a second by Councilmember Melendez. I would like to make an alternate motion. As I mentioned during my comments, that it seems that the recommendations that we see here in the agenda, such as approving the following service increases to lines 20, 30, adding Sunday services for 50 and 55, weekend services for line 70, upgrading line 10 to 40 to 15-minute services, and increasing service in the early morning and evening hours. We don't have costings for that, and we don't quite have an understanding of the manpower and equipment that that's going to take. For number 3, approving the following line geometry modifications. Line 10 to Cal State LA, I believe, is being delayed, but by taking action this evening, that would be implemented once that's available. Is that correct, Ms. Salazar?
That would be correct.
Line 30 to South Pasadena Metro Station. I think there's still questions around the split of line 50 into lines 50 and 55 and shortening line 55 and line 60. So I would make an amended motion that we, 1, receive and file Montebello Bus Lines Comprehensive Operations Analysis and Final Report. 2, authorize staff to begin implementation of the plan, and that would be subject to subparts. Number 3, the geometry modifications for lines 10, 30, 50, 55, and 60. And then secondarily, this evening, not approving the service increases until we have more information. And then lastly, or in two more parts, approving the COA fare structure that's recommended, the, the hybrid model that's been recommended, and then lastly, approving that a transit hub be placed at Washington and Greenwood. So that would be my amended motion.
Mayor, so we're approving the motion is to approve everything except line item number 4?
Except number 4 and modifying number 3 to continue discussions around line 50 and 55, but in all other parts, approving those.
And I'm sorry, Mayor, and that would be to continue the line 60, because here we put discontinuation, but consistent with our relationship with City of Pico Rivera, we would continue the line 60, obviously with some further review. So if that could be clarified.
Thank you for catching that, yes, and that would be continuing line 60.
Well, did you make a motion or?
Yeah, I'm making a motion to
All
that
right, I'll
effect.
second.
There's a second by Councilmember Melendez. Ms. Guillen?
Councilmember Melendez,
Aye.
Councilmember Tamayo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Peralta,
Aye.
Councilmember Jimenez, Mayor Torres.
Aye. And thank you for that very productive discussion. Moving on to item number 2, authorize the Montebello Fire Department Emergency Medical Services Delivery Proposal and Implementation Plan. And if you'll forgive me, I did gaffe on this. We'll take public comments first, and then we'll go into presentations.
We have one speaker for item number 2. Mr. Will Severa.
Good evening. I do believe that moving in this direction is going to be positive for the fire department as well as the residents of the city of Montebello. Granted, I know that there's going to be a lot of numbers. I'm sure it's going to be in the presentation, but I guess for me, I just want to clarify, example, how many paramedics would be needed for the 3 squads, because I believe we have 3 shifts, so 3 stations and so forth, so we can know how much personnel we're going to need. And also to clarify that when they're going to be looking for the firefighter EMT, are they going to be mainly manning the engines while we keep the paramedics on the squads? I think that's going to be important, as well as if we hire the additional staff, how does the finances look for it? Because, you know, a squad rig, you're probably going to be looking at roughly about $100,000 per unit when you're purchasing it, outfitting it with the lights, sirens, equipment, and so forth. It's not including, roughly a paramedic's probably going to be receiving something about $80,000, not including all the overtime and tenure. So I know that there was a few of the numbers that were given, but I think that's going to be important so we could see how we transition, because it's going to be steps at a time. It's not going to be all at once. Also, it speaks about if we were going to be recruiting at the academies, and that we can use, I believe that there was some type of fund that we're allowed to use, but how much resources would we need? Some places will sponsor you with your equipment. Some places will sponsor you with just only having you hold a placement spot. So this way, when other people are going, you're going to have a direct entry because you're going to be sponsored. Also, I noticed on the analysis, it says upgrading the buildings, and I know that's kind of out there, but I think that with what you guys were discussing is, you know, if you approve A, B is going to be following along with C, so are we opening up a can of worms? So I think if they were able to address some of those and give you that long span, especially eventually possibly being able to have the transport rights back, and at that point, the general fund is roughly spending about 65% of its budget on police and fire. So if we're able to actually stop giving the elderly and low-income people a transportation fee, I think that was put in like 2017, that I think they can actually remove that off of the residents if we're already doing the transport and you're not, because currently if you're going to go to the hospital, right, Montebello Fire Department's going to show up, the care ambulance will show up, and then they have to follow you to the hospital. Now, at one point, Beverly was going to close, so they possibly would have to go to PIH and so forth, right? So instead of taking that whole engine, where let's just pretend that that engine was going to take $1 a mile to cost versus the squad truck or an ambulance, maybe 50 cents a mile. So that's some of the budgeting that would, I think, help you guys make this decision. And I know it's not Angie's thing because she's already making her comments over there, but it's all good. So yeah, just, reaffirming how many staff would be needed so we could do a full implementation for 3 rigs as well as staffing. Thank you.
That concludes our speakers.
Thank you, Ms. Guillen. Chief, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, members of the public. Thank you for this opportunity to present some important issues impacting the fire service as we are living through some unprecedented times. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to focus on areas of high importance. I'm going to focus on staffing. I'm going to focus on first responder fatigue. I'm going to focus on mitigation of risk in emergency medical services, Montebello Fire Department organizational structure, looking into the future and establishing a strong foundation, addressing risk more effectively. According to Michael Rentenwald, Chief Academic Officer of American Scholars, we are living through the Great Reset. The fire service in general is experiencing nationwide shortages, and the workload for our firefighters has doubled, leaving them exhausted, vulnerable. Not only has our call volume increased, but our demands for service, our compliance, and the construction growth of the city. I encourage many questions tonight. I think we need to have this dialogue. It is truly important so that we can collaborate in establishing a strong fire department. I understand that this might seem like a huge ask, but what you will see is that we have a timeline, and therefore I encourage questions so that we can all be informed. As one of the community's cornerstones, we should fulfill the mission, vision, and core values we have sworn to uphold. And we can only accomplish this together as a city that's united. So in that spirit of resetting, I will provide an overview of the challenges, demands we face, solutions to meet these demands, and a strategic contingency to mitigate those impacts. This is an important transition for our department. It's about equipping our membership with the tools needed to safeguard the city of Montebello and support our surrounding neighbors. The ability to be able to protect our community and residents is essential and needs to be addressed with risk within the community more effectively. We're facing challenges every day. I see them. Active shooter all around us, new developments, modern construction materials, pandemic, epidemics, public health issues, the ACE project, substance abuse is at all-time high, and more. In 2022, the department received 8656 response calls per Verdugo Communications statistical data, compared to 4302 in 1991. Overall hazard staffing delivery model in 91 was 17 personnel on duty per day. For all of our 3 stations, more than 3 decades had passed, and that department has sustained the operation with the same amount. As you can see, it's concerning. I do want to update you on recruitments before I start my presentation. I think it's going to add value and it will put some perspective. As of today, I'm able to report that we have 8 new candidates on board. 3 of them are paramedics. On Monday, we will be onboarding 2 more candidates. 1 is a paramedic, and there are currently 7 in backgrounds right now, scheduled for academy. August 7th is the target date for the academy, for a total of 17. So as you can see, we've taken a very aggressive, robust approach to staffing our department. I've taken it very serious. So I will start the presentation with that.
Very quickly, Chief, if you can just kind of clarify a little bit what you mean by onboarding, because it sounds like there's the academy, it sounds like there's training, and then it sounds kind of like there's full-fledged, firefighter ready for. So if you can kind of clarify those numbers there.
So onboarding is people that have already completed their backgrounds, that we have them here. They're in our fire department. They're not integrated into the stations yet because they haven't had their formal training, which is a 4-week academy. So one of the things, the reason why I felt it was so important in working with Arlene and HR was there's so much competition right now. Many of them are in backgrounds with other departments. So I felt normally we would wait for August 7th and start them all at once, but I felt the need was to bring them on, have them size for their turnouts, have them size for their uniforms, have them fit test for their air pack masks, have all that done ready so that August 7th we hit the ground running with a 4-week academy, and then after that they would hit their assignments. Does that answer that, Mayor?
Yeah, so when you talk about the 8 new candidates that are being onboarded, they're going through that process. When you talk about the 7 candidates in background, that's the step just before that onboarding. Yeah, thank you very much for the clarification.
You're very welcome. So with that, I'll be starting. Okay, I've got the clicker here. So what you're seeing there right now is our organization, our org chart. You see the fire chief's FTE, and you see the assistant deputy director, her oversight, and then you'll see the different divisions of the fire department. And again, I'm open for questions as I'm moving along in the PowerPoint.
You can move through your presentation, and then we'll just, assemble our questions and comments as you, at the conclusion.
Got it. Okay. So current service delivery structure today, and this is ×3 because we have 3 shifts and we also have 3 stations. So on duty today, fully staffed, we have 4 3 pieces of equipment, including our BC. We have a battalion chief. We have 3 battalion chiefs, 3 shifts, and I'll break that out. We have 12 captains for 3 shifts, 1 on duty each day, ×3 shifts. We have engineers, and we have 24 firefighters, and that's the A, B, and C shift working basically 48 hours, which equates to 56 hours per week. Staffing per shift, here we go, is 1 battalion chief, 4 captains, 4 engineers, and 8 firefighters, fully staffed on duty per day. The current staffing per shift, here I broke it down. So the A shift, they come in for 48 hours. You would have a battalion chief, you would have 4 captains, you would have 4 engineers, and you have 8 paramedics that day. Same thing on the B shift, and same thing on the C shift. And that's 17 per day. And if you times that ×3, you'll see it there, that's 51 FTEs in suppression. You can see that they work 48 hours. They're paid 56 because of the Fair Labor Standard Act, which equates to the why we call it the 56-hour week, but it's 48-hour, 2 24-hour shifts. There is our staffing roster right there. You can see the A shift, and I left the names out, but you can see truck 55 is fully staffed. You can see engine 55 is staffed with the captain. We have a vacant engineer. We have a staff firefighter, and we have a vacant firefighter. So I've addressed all the vacancies there for you on all 3 shifts, and you can see to the right, we have 2 current vacant captain's positions. We have 2 engineers positions, and we have 11 firefighter. So current vacancies in the fire department today are 15. There's Station 55, 600 North Montebello. Fully staffed that station, you would have 2 captains assigned to that station, 1 in the engine and 1 in the truck. You would have an engineer driving the engine and 1 driving the truck. And you would have 2 paramedics, firefighter paramedics, each one on each piece of equipment. And they're there for 24 hours. And like I said, it's a 24/7 operation. There's Station 56 down in the south part of town. That station, fully staffed, is one captain, one engineer, and you got 2 firefighters. Current staffing model is displayed there, and that's for a 24-hour shift. And I just want to add a little bit about this station in the south. That is pretty south. That is a working station when they get structure fires. A lot of our target hazards are in that city. A lot of challenges for 4 guys down there when we're fully staffed. We got the railroad tracks that can delay resources coming in. You've got apartments. You've got we've got the Chevron down there, tank farm. We have. It's a lot of work for 4 guys down there when they're working. They're highly trained. They're professionals, and as you can see, we've learned to fight fire very aggressive. So very proud of these, our staff. That building is equipped for a squad. When we built that station, there was a squad down there, as you can see, that other bay. I just wanted to highlight Station 56. Station 57 is our oldest station in the city, built in the late 40s. There's a captain there, there's an engineer, there's 2 firefighter paramedics, and that's, again, a 24/7 operation. I'm going to get into emergency calls and non-emergency call responses. These are examples of activities to report and not to report. So emergency call, what delineates an incident? All fires, vehicle accidents, EMS and rescues, hazardous material incidents, severe weather emergencies, overpressure, ruptures, explosions, false alarms, and fire calls. And it goes down. I just put our main ones right now. Also non-emergency calls that we have to go on. Service calls, good intent calls, smoke detector installations, community paramedicine. And then there's those that we do not report that we're also very busy, where parades, training, fire prevention events, standby at sporting events, code inspections. There's our fire response data from Verdugo. You can see our fire calls in red. You can see where I went back to 1991. You can see as we're progressively going up every year, and it's all broken down there. So proposed analysis, we'll get into that right now. Proposed staffing per shift, 3 shifts again. You got the A, B, and C shift. The battalion chief would be 1, the captains would be 4. That wouldn't change. The engineers would remain the same. Here the firefighters would be 8, and there would be 6 paramedics on the squads for a total of 23 times, total of 23, and then per 24-hour shift, and you times that times 3 shifts, A, B, and C, for a total of 69 full-time employees. And that's adding 6 paramedics per shift per day. Here's the proposed service delivery model structure. So you got 4 fully staffed model. We got fire suppression operations. Again, we're showing 5 battalion chiefs. We were showing the 3 operations. We're showing the training BC, and we're showing the 5th, which would be an EMS chief, which is something that we're requesting. We're showing the 12 captains that we currently have, minus the 2 vacancies, the engineer, and then the paramedics right there, the 18, and then the 24 firefighters. There's the increase right there for A, B, and C. So we're increasing by 6 per day from 17. There's the position classifications and total FTEs per year. You can see the adopted, the proposed, and it's there. Oh, I forgot to hit the arrow on that one. Right there, there's the position classification and total FTEs per year. There's the proposed staffing calendar, what we would need to fill. So we would have 12 vacancies on the A shift. We would have 10 vacancies on the B shift and 11 vacancies on the C shift for a total of 33 with the proposed staffing. So here's a budget summary. that we put in. These are the numbers. As you can see, the PERS members that we have, and then the PEPRA, and I know Arlene, and we have our finance director here that can do a way better job of explaining any budget questions if we come back to questions. But I wanted to put this out of all the transparency is there. There's the full burden rate is there, and there's the estimated cost for 18 firefighters full-time. So it's all here. So when did we, our squads began in 1972 with the paramedic program, and in 2002, we transitioned to paramedic engines. Emergency medical technicians versus paramedics. I think that was a question that we had last council meeting. So a paramedic responds to emergency calls, provides advanced life treatment. They follow up with the patient to the hospital on ALS calls. An EMT, they extinguish fires. They provide basic life support. A firefighter, a paramedic can also provide the elevated medical care. The difference between an EMT and a paramedic is the amount of training and the level of care they can provide. Paramedics follow a strict Los Angeles County Department of Health Services policies and mandates. Currently, right now in our department, we have 8 paramedics in rank. We have 15 paramedics, and we have 10 EMTs right now serving in the fire department. So here's the department staffing needs. There is a comprehensive focus on hiring in order to fill vacancies in the firefighter ranks, as outlined in the graph below. So we have ongoing recruitment. We just interviewed today. Every Thursday we're holding interviews, so we've become very aggressive. We have a fire paramedic we're flying the flyer for and interviewing. We have firefighter paramedic laterals, we have firefighter EMTs, and we also have our reserve auxiliary program. All those are channels into our staffing. We also have a Camp Miller program, and we have a training program to allow them to go to paramedic school. We're also developing our EMS division. As you can see right now, we would like to request a 40-hour battalion chief as part of the staffing model. So we're all risk fire and rescue department suppression and operation division. This is what the new staffing model would look like. One of the questions from the audience was, can the paramedics work on the engines? Absolutely, because we're using the firefighter position as a position to send them to paramedic school. We're always gonna need paramedics. That's always gonna be our model. So that's kind of our entry. As paramedics, we would have a rotation where we could rotate them to the engine and back, because these firefighters obviously need mentoring, and we're preparing them for paramedic school. So yes, they would be allowed to work on the engines, but we would start the firefighters, the EMTs on the engines, because they wouldn't be able to work as paramedics. The squads, there's Squad 55, Squad 56, and Squad 57. One of the thoughts behind this is that RAs, rescue ambulances, we have transportation rights that are coming up in 25, 26. We've already sent our letter of intent to Department of Health Services that we intend to bid on our transportation rights, and the city would be given a priority if we desire to move in that direction. I think it would be a very prudent and smart move for the city for us to pursue our transportation rights. And we added MCAP there because we did get a grant for a second team, so we put them down there. There's our proposed org chart. So you saw the old one, and this is the proposed one. Well, you saw the current one, I should say, and then this is the proposed org chart. So we're aligning fire service and emergency medical services structure with the region. Two main areas of importance: the why. I always encourage my guys to ask why. Why are we here? What is our purpose? Why do we do what we do? And this is a big why. So we mitigate all around risk. And we want to enhance, because everything we do, again, is about our customers, our residents. This is why we're here, and this is why this presentation is here, because I'm very passionate about delivering the best level of care for our residents. So we want to enhance our patient care and their safety. Let's look at the City of Glendale Medical Services Division. Staffing, they have an EMS battalion chief, EMS captain, paramedic ambulance operator, coordinator, medical director, public safety assistant. 80% of their calls are EMS. City of Downey, our neighbor, Emergency Medical Services Division. Chief officers of BC, EMS captain, a nurse educator, ambulance coordinator. 80% of their calls are EMS. City of Burbank Fire Department, Emergency Medical Services Division, staffing, a battalion chief, training, safety. 82% of their calls are EMS. Culver City Fire Department, smaller department than ours. Emergency Medical Services, Assistant Chief Operations, Medical Director, EMS Captain, EMS Secretary, Nurse Educator, Ambulance Operator, 80% EMS calls. And then we go to Pasadena, Emergency Medical Services Division, staffing, a Deputy Fire Chief, EMS Battalion Chief, Chief Firefighter, and they oversee the port, which is their version of the MCAP team. Recruitment and engagement strategies. So here is what we do. We start with our explorers, 14 to 18. That is basically their introduction to the fire service. And just so you know, we're fully full, and we're expanding that program. Amazing work is being done at that level by our firefighters. Then there's Rio Hondo Fire Academy sponsorships. I currently have worked out with Verdugo Fire Academy and Rio Hondo Fire Academy. I am able to sponsor our explorers through the Fire Academy. That's really important. Again, we're feeding into our fire department. For your career development, reserve firefighters, there are auxiliaries, 18 and up. Once we sponsor them through the academy, we have a partnership with PTI, Paramedic Training Institute. We developed the Captain Miller training program. We've also, as of lately, developed a partnership with the East LA Los Angeles College. So you can see we're actively giving our youth, our folks here in the community, all the tools so that we can integrate them back into our fire department. Diversification and hiring strategies. On-the-go interviews every Thursday. Chief Estrada and a firefighter from the floor will come up every Thursday, and they will do the interviews. Firefighter EMT paramedic training, PTI, and lateral with a bonus. So we're also looking for folks that have experience, because we definitely need the experience. So preparing for change, a first responder and public safety system restructure. You know, the hospital, I don't want to focus on that too much, but yes, we need Beverly Hospital. We want a hospital in our community is what we want. That is optimum for us. You know, with everything they've done and they've been through, it's going to take a while, but I have faith that they will come back, and we need them. We need them because the hospital system is tired, and it's at the brinks of what we're seeing. There's so much diversion going on. Our engines are everywhere in LA County. And then we have the housing and community redevelopment, new housing, Metro Heights, Cesar Chavez, Top Golf. These are all going to impact. They're going to impact our calls. They're going to generate more calls for us. I can't tell you the data right now. We don't have anything to base it on, but it's going to impact us. But there is no data available for that right now. Project implementation timeline. Obviously, that's the big thing here, the big key. So July, August, September, here we are. City Council meeting, approved position and implementation plan. Staff report to purchase one 2024 Ford F-550 from South Coast Fire Equipment. Use one paramedic rescue squad that's available immediately, which is our MCAP unit. We do have that one available. And then there would be a staff report to purchase the Ford F-550, I'm sorry. We'd be looking at purchasing 3 over a timeline all the way up to next year. So implementation would be this October to roll out the first paramedic squad. Again, there is a lot of work from staffing to buying to purchasing to equipping them, and then having Department of Health Services come out and approve the squad. So hence why the reasons why the EMS chief is so important and critical in all these developments and stages of implementing this thing. We're looking at August 24 for the additional second squad, possibly a third squad. We still have the ability to keep our paramedic engines. We're still going to hold on to them. So as the squads phase in, we can phase one into a BLS engine or an assessment engine. But we're not going to, obviously, we're phasing in. So we're not losing any kind of a, how would I say, resources. We're just going to be adding and transitioning to it seamlessly. This delineates the all the way to November, May of 2025, which is when our transportation rights are coming up. And my intent would be to put in for those. And then if we have the paramedic squads already and we have that staff, they can automatically slide into the rescue ambulances, which would be another seamless integration by having that personnel on staff. So there is a timeline. It's not something that we roll out tomorrow. It's just we're here for approval to be able to start getting ahead of it and start, buying, hiring, staffing, and going in that direction. Again, everything we do is around the community. We're community focused and value driven. We have 7 core values that are extremely important to us and our staff, and we thrive on those core values. I will say that no single approach is the answer to addressing a problem. The unique needs and assets of each community must be considered. And I'm just honored to be here before you today, and I hope I was able to put everything out there that I know and that I have, and open to any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Chief. Appreciate you coming back this evening to further explain what council and the community might expect in terms of some of these reforms to our fire department. Councilmember Melendez, any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Also, I see a lot of our fire personnel here. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you all do. We're very appreciative of all the hard work. I know it's our fire department continues to getting different service calls, and it's just different times. And I know many of you have had to adapt to some of the changes. So just want to thank all of you for all the work that you do. Thank you for the presentation, Chief. I saw, it's great to see the stats, the statistics, the analysis, the number of EMS calls, substantial. Thank you for also providing the regional scope of what the structure of our regional fire departments are looking like. The recruitment and engagement strategy also great. It's providing a strong workforce, a strong pipeline. I know we're getting a lot of new people, a lot of young people into the department, and I believe that this system provides the ability for them to be better equipped, better trained, better prepared, and for them to be successful in our fire department and in their careers overall as a firefighter. Again, I think this is great. It's coming in a time where there might be a lot of uncertainty with Beverly Hospital and with a new hospital coming in, the acquisition, and there might be some services there that might take time to bring back. So definitely, again, thank you for the fire department, for our personnel, for being able to adapt and to the new changes happening in our fire personnel. So thank you for everything that you all do.
Welcome. Councilmember Tamayo.
Your presentation is very much appreciated, all of the detail. Thank you very much. And thank you for your willingness to change with the times, to go into the squad method. And so you had like a phased approach to that, so that was appreciated. And public safety is, of course, one of the major concerns here in the community. So one of your numbers that you had with the vacancies and the staff that is needed, so that doesn't take into account the new coming, the homes, the Metro Heights and the Top Golf and the Cesar Chavez project. So that's not accounted for quite yet in the numbers that you presented?
Well, we don't have any data to see what what we're going to see as far as an increase in runs. I can tell you the average person that goes in a home, it's 4 to 5, so the population is going to increase if we just do the math up there at Metro Heights. So, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to I would be speculating if I told you that we're going to have enough resources to address the growth. But we're getting ahead of it substantially by adding 3 squads and also the ability to keep our paramedic engines and our paramedics on the engines. It's going to be a very robust system once it rolls out and we see the end of it. Also, with that in mind, we have to think of expansion. You brought up a good point. To your point, Councilmember Tamayo, is entertaining a 4-station possibly. So we would have that squad available for a 4-station if we needed to go in that direction as we see the growth. I've never seen growth like this. It's nice. It's great. But also with that, we can't forget that with 17 on duty, these guys, it's concerning.
Right.
It's concerning. And this is why I'm here.
And Councilmember Tamayo, to your point, yes, these additional firefighters, these entry level, we heard it very loud and clear that council's direction was to invest in entry, not so much on the top. So we heard that very loud and clear. These additional firefighters, we took into consideration as Metro Heights and those types of things. There were triggers in the language. I didn't bring it with me, and we'll bring that if this plan gets approved to move forward. Some of the language that was incorporated into the Metro Heights development agreement. So there are funds available. I don't have those exact dollars for when certain phasing of that project comes into play. The other things that we also considered in this adding additional firefighters was the ACE project that will be coming. There will be a point where that traffic alone, imagine an engine trying to, try to get across already jam-packed, bottlenecked areas. So staff have been very concerned about those traffic diversions that already exists now, what that would look like if we can't mobilize in these smaller types of units. So those are all things that we're trying to address critically and trying to get aggressive on that. Further, it wasn't mentioned, but I'll mention that, is our ability to actually order these types of squad vehicles and get them in less than a year. And so some of the lead time on some of these vehicles, especially these specialty units, can be upwards of 2 years. And so we're trying to be progressive in looking at any of our other neighbors that might have extra squads available that we can enter into short-term MOUs with them, whether it's a 1 or 2 year kind of borrow plan, like if you have extras, LA City, some of the other ones, we do know that there's some out there. So we're trying to get ahead of just the overall shifting in Montebello. We know that it's coming. We just don't have that. So we're trying to be as progressive, innovative, and also considering that if you looked back at some of the numbers, a large percentage of our employee base is now PEPRA, which means that a lot of the more senior firefighters will be retiring in the next 5-6 years, so we need to fill that bench. And so we're just trying to open our horizons to start earlier and trying to move folks up as quickly as possible. And so all those things were considered in these numbers looking forward. And we know it's a big dollar number. However, we think that, as the investment starts, we're not going to obviously fill all those positions just because there's nobody, we're all fighting for the same person, but we want to be prepared for it financially and just overall ordering our equipment, being ready for it.
Thank you.
I just want to add, Councilmember, you brought up a good point. The target hazards that we have, the north has the gas property that is closed, but we do have significant risks there that need to get mitigated. So that's an area next to homes. We do have now it's called a WUI area, a wildland urban interface. We built a community surrounded by a WUI area which is also now, getting on scene, getting our resources there immediately, and do aggressive fire attack is important. So, and then we have the Chevron property. And we do have a lot of other things in the south, but I had to bring those because all those, with the 17, as we grow, we have to start looking at those risks and what risk are we willing to take in our community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem Peralta?
Yes, first off, just want to thank you, Chief, for the presentation and also your willingness to collaborate and being open to our comments and our questions. And also just want to thank, we have, I know, MCAP here, as well as administration and our firefighters for your hard work. This line of work is not easy. You all come here to service our community, especially with the challenges that our current department is facing. And so do want to acknowledge that and acknowledge that our council does want to strive towards creating a department where we are meeting the challenges, where we are improving, and that at the end of the day, showcase that we want to retain you here, and we want to ensure that we create a department where you feel appreciated and have an opportunity to grow within the city. With that, I do appreciate the fact that we are looking at ways to improve and change our models within the city. I think as we are seeing an increase in population, an increase in the types of calls, I think that the city needs to pivot in order to begin making the changes that will hopefully relieve the burden that we currently are facing with the current model that we have. And so just for some questions, in regards to the restructured model, how will this address the challenges of recruitment and retention for the firefighter paramedics and the firefighter EMTs? I know that this is specifically an issue that we're currently facing, and that with the increase of more positions, what are our efforts in ensuring that we do get a qualified and diverse workforce?
I think we already, I know we already started that, Mayor Pro Tem. One of them is with our, what I call our Farm League. As we start to sponsor, identifying them early, and then sponsoring them through the academy, the paramedic school. So those are what we call the feeders into our organization. So that's one entry. The other is that what I'm starting to see a big difference now is the on-go interviews. I'm getting a lot of inquiries from a lot of people now that like the fact that they're not having to wait. They're getting answers from HR immediately. They're being processed immediately. So we're starting to see now a change in our recruitment, and it's a breath of fresh air, because a year ago, 3-4 months to process. We're doing it, trying to get it done within a month, and that's comforting for me, because I'm seeing now people applying. I'm seeing now that we can get, hey, we got folks here that want to work in Montebello, and that's rewarding. Not to mention our own, that we don't want to forget about them. So it's that fine balance of bringing the outside skills, but not forgetting about and then with that merging together, we're able to get to where we need to get. And this is why I say cautiously that it's something that I can't sit here and promise you that tomorrow we're gonna roll out 3 squads, because that would not be prudent of me. It's something that we're gonna aspire to, and we're gonna work diligently. You have my word, and you can ask HR and Arlene. I'm constantly communicating with them every day about the progress, tracking my individuals as they're coming out of backgrounds. So did that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate the different avenues towards starting to create that opportunity for attracting more candidates into our department. I think one of the, and this is just a general comment, but I think one of the issues that I would like council to really begin looking at is that we have an issue in that we get employees and we get firefighters and we train them, and then they end up getting the training and then leaving to other departments that are paying more and providing better salaries and benefits. And so I think one of the key issues in ensuring that we have a an experienced workforce in our city, is that specific issue that I think currently we need to begin looking at, which is specifically how do we ensure we have a competitive pay and competitive benefits to ensure that we actually retain. Because I think what I'm afraid of is having these positions, filling them, and then having that continuous issue that Montebello has been plagued with retention. That's more of a general comment, but I do appreciate the different tactics in regards to just having interviews, more opportunities to interview, and more opportunities to sponsor candidates. In regards to funding, are there any specific funding sources that are tracking right now, or is this specifically currently being projected through the general fund? Are there any potential grants that we might have in the horizon for offsetting some of the costs to these vehicles and/or services that we will be providing?
So I'll just answer a portion of that. In regards to our Metro Heights development agreement, we will be getting at least $1 million towards increased, equipment, whether it's a unit or whatever. So we know that's coming. We do know in that development agreement that once a certain number of houses are occupied, that they will pay as part. We have like a trust fund. I think we know this. We'll pay for at least 2 of the firefighters moving forward. So that if this plan does move forward, those will be part of the financial costing that we'll bring back as part of what we can leverage. In regards to other funding sources, we have, and we are aware of funds that are available for areas where we're doing fire suppression in areas that are high risk. We do have high risk areas, as we know, in and around Montebello, and we will continue to apply for those. So every opportunity that we have to apply for additional equipment and things like that, we certainly do. Unfortunately, a lot of the grant funding does not go towards these types of services, but we will certainly keep looking for that, and as well as earmarks for additional money to address some of our capital investment challenges.
And I would just add that we just applied Monday for a Measure B grant, which would, we asked to, in the grant, we specify the 3 paramedic squads. Obviously, too early to tell if that could be awarded. And also, we applied a while back for our SAFER grant for 13 positions, and that would be 13 firefighter positions paid through the SAFER grant. It's a competitive grant, but I think we have an outstanding chance based on all our target hazards, based on the growth of the city, and that we should know something later this year, towards the end of the year, whether that gets awarded. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. And also, by October, we should know. And then there's wildland grants that we're pursuing. So my staff is constantly looking at any revenue stream, and we'll bring those to you for approval, because we feel that we don't really want to try to hit the general fund, and we want to try to offset it as much as we can and be fiscally responsible. I think that's part of my job, and that's what my staff will do. Constantly looking at any avenue or revenue stream that we can get to offset our general grant.
And in the future, Mayor Pro Tem,
our general fund.
I'm sorry, Fernando, transportation rights, if we are able to recover our transportation rights, this is everything associated with ambulance recovery costs. The insurance, the city council will be able to adjust fees for those that they feel may not, need some fee waivers and things like that. We'll have more control of that. We'll have the ability to recover additional funds through the insurance recovery process. It's a very complex formula, but at any rate, all those other communities that have ambulance services part of their service delivery, I would tell you that a majority of their general fund is offset by the recovery of the insurance. So ultimately, that would be part of our recovery source. We do also have communications funds that we have that is collected through the fire communications fund as well. So we have a couple of different funds, but I cannot tell you with 100% assurance that it would pay for all of them. But again, this would be just a plan. We would that would be part of the consideration moving forward.
Thank you for those comprehensive details, and best of luck in those grants that we currently have applied. I really do hope that we are able to get some of those funds, and definitely appreciate the initiative to begin tracking some of those additional opportunities to offset our general fund for some of these costs. In regards to seeing that this is, restructuring our fire department and new services being implemented, are we looking at potentially collaborating with any external partners or consultants to conduct the staffing analysis and just ensuring that we are going about this in a way that we are identifying our gaps, our training, and how to best kind of transition into something like a restructuring of our fire department?
We did. We do have consultants on staff that we consulted with, and I'm part of the also the LAFCA group in the LA region. So also we use a network of chiefs where we're daily consulting and exchanging information, and that's how I get a lot of my information. And it's a great support system.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your answer. And then just about two more questions. Thank you for your patience. How will the fire department ensure a fair and transparent process for allocating staff members? I guess just an understanding of how we will be transitioning our current firefighters, paramedics into this model. And I know that there, I believe, was a position being made for a captain. Are there possibilities of potentially identifying, training, and promoting someone within the department for this type of major role that is being sought?
So I think I understood kind of a couple of questions there. So I'll break the first one down. Obviously, we're relying on our seasoned medics to help support this, but we also, one of the attractive things about having fire engines and we attract firefighter medics is that they want to work on these fire engines. So we want to keep that available to them. So there would be a rotation. The county runs this model a lot, but again, the intent is to bring our firefighters in and also integrate them into paramedic squads, getting them to school as soon as they're off probation, and then have that rotation. But the other thing that's coming is a new model that Department of Health Services is going to start to pilot here in the county, and that staffing model is it's called a one-on-one, which is one paramedic and one firefighter on a squad. It's a model that's been used in San Bernardino County. It's to address the staffing crisis in the region. So it's something that all 29 fire chiefs approved, working with DHS, and it's something that if that model, as we pilot it this year, October, is scheduled to pilot in the region, that would mean that our squads could be staffed with a EMT and a paramedic, and then of course the calls would depend on the level of calls that they would be responded to. They wouldn't go on certain calls, they would only be able to respond. It would be a tiered kind of a dispatching, and Verdugo is able to handle that. So all those things are being looked at as the big picture. As far as a captain's position for, do you know what division or?
It's a fire battalion chief, battalion chief position. Are there opportunities to, seeing that this is a phased approach, to potentially identify, train someone into this position?
Absolutely. It's got to be somebody that obviously wants to make their world EMS.
Yeah.
Because it is it's all EMS. It's very heavy driven, a lot of meetings with DHS. Also, as we roll out all these different layers that we're talking about, paramedic squads, transportation rides. So this person would obviously have to encompass that world, want to live in that world. And but absolutely, it would be open. And we have nobody in mind, so definitely. And also mentoring, developing somebody, that's always the best way too. Somebody that's interested, but definitely, we didn't.
Yeah, I appreciate your answer, and I appreciate kind of giving the context behind what this position entails and really kind of understanding the world of EMS and making that the priority within this position. Lastly, these are just comments. I would just like to say that seeing that this is a potential item in which we will go through, if approved, in regards to the restructuring of our fire department. I do just encourage a collaborative space, ensuring that our current employees and firefighters are given the time to understand and the training to be able to make these transitional shifts within our department, and ensuring that their concerns and questions are being met. I think that a phased approach is one in which is crucial in regards to being able to kind of analyze how we go about it step by step. It allows us the opportunity to project out our costs that we would be, having in regards to adopting some of these items with vehicles, with engines, and with additional staffing. It also, I think, gives us an opportunity to begin just on a council level, beginning the conversation and just identifying our gaps and how do we improve retention, how do we improve hiring. I want to make sure that we make your job easier, and it's not an easy job when it comes to having vacant positions that aren't being filled, because we have candidates who are seeking positions in cities that are just paying more, or kind of being trained here, and we invest in them, we invest in their training education, and then they end up leaving to another city. I think that's a real core issue that needs to be addressed as we go through this phased approach of restructuring our fire department. And at this moment, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Jimenez.
Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. And thank you to the members of the fire department who are in the back that I assume are here in support of this, or to show their support. So it's nice to see so many of the members sitting here tonight patiently. Thank you for your service. And just like the transportation department, I take a lot of pride in knowing that we have our own fire department, because they are the ones who are out there with the community. It seems like the fire department is who the community trusts the most. So thank you, Chief, for always making sure that you highlight that you want to provide and bring the best services to the community. So I think that by supporting this emergency medical services or EMS, whatever, however you want to phrase it, this proposal, it's such a smart investment in our public safety, right? And it's not just here in our city, but just across the surrounding communities. So again, by embracing this, I think what we do is we make sure that our communities do receive the highest level of emergency medical care when they need it the most. And having our MCAP team, again, this is such an enhancement to the department. And again, thanking the members who are in the back, I do want to ask, if possible, because we've heard it from all of our colleagues, if we could have one of the members, or at least two of them, come up and maybe express their support of this, or why they feel this is important, because we want to hear it from them. So maybe Mr. Bonilla, who's the president of the association, is it possible that we get one of the members up here?
Ms. Jimenez, those questions are more appropriately referred to the chair in terms of how the meeting is run.
Well, I would like to hear if we could possibly form some of the members, because I think it's important that we hear them out too. This is such a big piece, and again, being the chief, it's great that he's the one doing the presentation, but these are the men that are out there every day putting their life on the line. So I think it's important that we hear from them, and to emphasize the importance of this. So just that people understand, again, what we're trying to do here.
I appreciate that. Just as a matter of general procedure, asking for reports from members in the audience should be more appropriately directed toward the chair to invite them forward, as opposed to...
Will you please, Mr. Mayor, invite Mr. Bonilla forward so that he could express his support or any concerns that he might have?
I understand, but to finish my statement, so because this has happened in a few instances, but this is just a nice moment to just kind of talk about the procedures in meetings. So in the future, if you could just refer those kinds of questions to the chair, that'd be appreciated.
Okay, I'm asking you if you could please invite them.
I've heard you.
Thank
Just letting you know the process. Mr. Bonilla?
Thank you for inviting me. The chief and I have been working together for a while for this. I think this is a good thing. This is a good thing. We're still learning about it. Sorry, I don't have anything prepared, but like I said, I know the chief and I have been working hard together to try to get these squads in place to make sure that the fire engines are in the city where we need them, and we can get as much help to the community as we can.
Thank you, Joy.
Ms. Jimenez, is there anything else?
Nothing else. It is just nice to hear that this team is working together. And again, this is for again, to enhance the services of our fire department is making sure that our communities is safer, which is something that we all strive for.
Chief, thank you very much. To jump right into some of the questions here and to hopefully understand the presentation a little bit better, if you go back to the slide on the budget summary.
You do it, Kimberly?
On the left side, so we see firefighter EMT's fully burdened rate, and at the bottom, this would be the estimated cost for the 18 additional firefighters that would be staffing these squads. Is that correct?
That would be 18, Mayor. That is correct. I'm gonna pull up my, I can't see that one.
Sure, no worries.
Okay, I've got it here. To answer
So
your question, Mayor, yes, we would be adding 18 additional positions to staff this over the period of time that we discussed.
And so we see that coming in at a cost of $1.84 million, and that would be in addition to the numbers that, for example, that we just passed with the recent budget approval.
That is correct. So the adopted budget is for our staffing that we currently have right now. So this would be an additional to that budget.
And aside from the 18 firefighters, just to clarify, are there other positions that are contemplated in this change? I understand that there's the 1 battalion chief that's being proposed for EMS services.
And that is it, Mayor.
And that's it?
That is it, correct.
And what would the cost be for that additional position?
That would be battalion chief's wages. I'm sure that, I don't have that number, but we could get it. Would you know it, Director Solarza, right off? Yeah, I wouldn't know that, Mayor, what the battalion chief makes right now, fully burdened. But it would be what our suppression BCs are making.
Okay. Because I don't think we've received the final budget quite yet with the changes that council requested in our last meeting. But taking a look at some of these numbers, we start to see that, we're moving towards the red. And in the conversation this evening, we heard how the anticipated funding would come from various sources, from grants and whatnot. But just keeping conscious of some of those initial startup costs in terms of if we were to go the battalion chief route, doing 1 squad, 6 positions, so 6 out of the 18 and taking a third off of this 1.8 million would be about $600,000, right? So we're talking about that $600,000 plus a battalion chief, and that basically eats up the projected surplus that we have for the most recent budget. So just for my colleagues to be aware that, I think this is why it's very important to talk about the numbers behind the actions that we're taking, because I don't think there's anyone here that doesn't want increased safety for our community, or anyone here that doesn't want better transportation services. But the fact of the matter is that our resources aren't infinite, and this is where prioritizing, working together, and setting those goals really becomes extremely important, right? So I guess my question is, so with this calendar that you've provided and going about this in a phased approach, have some of these numbers been contemplated? I mean, and Director Solarza, this might be also for you, just, with the changes in transit going on, the changes in fire, the recent approval of the new police MOUs, we're seeing a lot of, I think, increased costs or costs that may not have been contemplated in the most recent budget. So I think overall, my question is just, how do we plan to pay for these in the short term? And Director Salorza, feel free.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I appreciate your indulgence. So, yes, I mean, part of what we're looking at here, obviously, none of this has been anticipated in the adopted budget. Okay. As an aside, timing-wise, we were able to anticipate the recent POA and PMA MOU increases. So at least, what was adopted a month ago includes allotments for those increases. But I guess in looking at this model, given how long it takes to recruit, I mean, it would be great to be able to hire folks right off the bat. I mean, I think there's enough slack in our budget overall that with a phased-in approach, which, I mean, that's what the chief has presented, with a phased-in approach, something like this could be done more or less in the timeline that's been presented. And I know there's been discussions about borrowing vehicles, in the short term while we procure our own vehicles in the longer term, which obviously is a cost savings there. Leasing from a neighboring agency is gonna be a lot cheaper than buying our own. And then in terms of staffing, phasing in the staffing. And whether we like to or not, there's always gonna be a vacancy factor, across all the ranks. And so that plays into kind of the formula when you're looking at staffing this updated EMS model. So, I guess the good news is, I don't even think the 600,000 would hit as, going 1/3 would hit as immediately. And that's where, we'd have more data in terms of how we're progressing throughout the fiscal year. Maybe we delay certain expenses to pay for the staffing, or maybe the staffing takes a little longer to get on board so that we have a little more lead time to make adjustments to the budget. So.
The other thing
Understood.
we have done, I'm sorry, Mayor,
Sure.
is where if, for example, if we have certain positions, we fund them a certain percentage in the year. So for example, if there's 18, we would say, and we would add them to our table of work, so we know there would be 18, but say in year one, we would only fund 6 positions, 6 full-time, because there's an assumption that there's a vacancy rate, right? And then in year 2, we would then go from, X to maybe a little bit more. That's because there's going to be a natural attrition. So like Michael mentioned, there's never at 100% that we're ever at 100% of what we actually budgeted, what's at the table of work. So we've done that before. I think we mentioned that when we were doing the presentation for the police department. So in a particular case like this, just because you have them listed, we can make notations that we won't fund all those positions until, until we have either the funding or we put into triggers. And so I just want to make that recommendation that we have done that before. That could be part of the consideration, because this, even if we went out today and we had 18 people outside, it would take us a while to onboard everyone else. So I want to just offer that up as a consideration, as this is a plan that would take a couple of years for us to technically kind of roll out.
Absolutely, and that's well received. Thank you, Ms. Salazar.
Thank you.
If you can also kind of clarify, and if we can move to the projected implementation timeline slide. Thank you, Director Salorza.
Mayor, I just got the pay for a base pay battalion chief, 121,000
Thank you.
annually.
As you find the page there in your presentation, Chief, looking at the first couple steps of this projected implementation, we see that there are a few items that are repeated here, so I just wanted to understand what the full picture is. So in the July, August, September box in the upper left, we see approved positions and implementation plan, and then we see staff report to purchase a 2024 Ford F-50. And we see that repeated twice more, along with the notations under each of them, use one existing fire paramedic rescue squad. So that would be purchasing 3 new vehicles and using our current staffing to staff those vehicles?
So right now available, Mayor, is only 1. that's available on a lot right now. The other ones are at least a minimum of a year out. So we would be requesting, providing a staff report to hopefully capture the one that is still on the lot. It hasn't been, and then rolling from there, staffing that paramedic squad.
That one.
Timeline of October, one, correct, that is one, Mayor, correct. And then at that point also coming to you to say, hey, we'd like to lease, purchase, get our PO in for 2 additional squads or 1 additional squad. Like I said, this is all fluid, and this is why we're here. And then get it in. It's gonna be a timeline of at least a year before we see a second squad, third one. So this is what these boxes are. Eventually, the goal is to get 3 paramedic squads. Again, we're here to have that discussion. But one is one that I would like to implement by October.
Thank you. And so moving on to the October-December block there, and I think this is where a little bit of my confusion comes in. So it says implement 1 fire paramedic rescue squad and a report to purchase 3 Ford F-50s. So I guess part of the question is, how does that report differ from the one that we see in July, August, September? And then also in that same October-December block, we see twice more staff report to purchase 3 2024 Ford F-50s. So it almost looks like we're purchasing 9 of them.
So we're purchasing, because we have a second MCAP team. The original one, when the other ones come in, the first one we purchased would go to MCAP. So now MCAP would have 2 squads, 1 for the second team, and then we would be buying 3, total of 4. And that's to outfit MCAP's second team. We don't have anything we're gonna start the recruitment. We have the grant for that second team. They don't have a vehicle.
So we're purchasing a total of 4 vehicles here.
4 total.
Okay.
We do have also, if that vehicle is not available to us right now, and it's off, it's been sold, we do have the MCAP squad available to us that we could repurpose. I know MCAP's probably cringing, but we could borrow it, but I guess that's a perfect vehicle for them and it works. So I really wouldn't want to do that, but it would be a borrow is what that would be only. To return it to them.
Okay. I also want to take this conversation in this moment, talking about Beverly Hospital and some of the impacts to our department that we saw. For myself, this conversation really came to the forefront once we saw our resources being diverted outside of the city. But obviously this is something that's been a conversation for a lot longer, considering the increased calls for medical service and the increased need to have those, the ability to respond with those smaller teams. Can you give a little bit of an update, and Ms. Salazar, or if you know, on the status of services at Beverly Hospital? If we're anticipating the maternity ward, pediatrics, and emergency services to be restored shortly, or like what that timeline looks like?
As of today, I've only heard some very minor considerations. We do know that their team has communicated with our planning department already on some just general repairs that need to be done. That's just part of their acquisition. But at this point, we do not have a definitive timeline when they're going to reinstate a full-on emergency room. Like in the past, the maternity ward, there's still a lot of moving parts. I understand there's also movement in some of the other parcels that were sold with that particular hospital. So as of today, we don't really have 100% timeline on the new investors and what they're actually going to do with the hospitals, other than trying to retain the 200+ beds. But we really, for us, our dependency is really in that emergency room and keeping the units here as close as possible.
Would we be able to follow up with them and just kind of see if there's been any changes since we last spoke?
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I believe this is going to be, I have 2 more comments here. So in one of the slides, or this might have been just during some of your remarks, Chief, excuse me, there were some cities that were mentioned as models and as reference points for this new medical services model. Among them were Burbank, Pasadena, and Glendale. And I just want to express, I think one of the things that's been a little bit of a learning curve on council is understanding how we compare our city to other cities, our services to other services. And I guess there's just a little bit of a question if Burbank, Pasadena, and Glendale are good markers, being that those are much larger systems that have totally different workloads. I mean, Pasadena has its own health department, right? We saw them activated during the COVID pandemic, and their roles were completely different than, well, not completely, but different than what the county was experiencing. Glendale in 2020 had 19,000 calls for service, which, is, a couple times, I believe, what our calls for service were, according to the presentation. And Burbank just also being a very massive city. All of that to say, in implementing some of these new positions, particularly the battalion chief, as we saw, there was a conversation around that during the last budget process. Do you see it as a prudent step to perhaps start that as a lower level position as this program is being built out, and then as we move forward and we start to take on those squads, those extra personnel, and maybe some of those higher level conversations, eventually transitioning that person into a battalion chief? If you can speak on that point.
You bring up two excellent points, Mayor, to your first point. When we look at the 19,000 calls that Glendale run, they're double our size. And we look at the amount of calls that we run, almost 10,000 with 3 stations and 3 ALS units. Really, the workload that our guys are experiencing is a lot more than what they're experiencing. They've got 10, 11 stations to run those calls. We're running 10,000 calls with 3 stations. That's concerning. That is very concerning to our guys sitting right there. That's fatigue. That's stress. The oversight. So Department of Health Services, working with the region, working with the state. These positions, they require the rank. You walk into these rooms and you'll see nothing but battalion chiefs, assistant chiefs. They're making decisions with the county. They're working in partnership with them. Not that lower level support staff would not work, but then again, when you're representing at the county level, at the state level, the rank does carry the merit and the weight that we need. So yeah, it is important to have an EMS chief. And I think Dr. knows that she was going to be here today, but she got sick. She's also a supporter of this. She sees the need. Our guys need this additional resource. It's a resource for training. It's a resource to have that person here 40 hours to be able to roll out all their training, develop their progress, track their progress. There's so much oversight that needs to be done at all different levels. So yes, definitely a battalion chief is where this person should live.
Thank you for your responses, Chief. And actually, I'll conclude my questions and comments there. So I will open it to my colleagues for a motion.
I'll make the motion.
There is a motion by Councilmember Melendez and a second by Councilmember Jimenez. Ms. Guillen?
Councilmember Melendez,
Aye.
Councilmember Tamayo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Peralta,
Aye.
Councilmember Jimenez, Mayor Torres.
Aye. And the item passes unanimously.
Thank you for everything.
That concludes our business for this evening. I'd like to thank my colleagues, our executive staff for putting this together and coming out this evening, and for our rank and file members that were able to make it and contribute to the conversation. And lastly, to the public listening and participating, thank you very much. With business being concluded, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
There's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem and a second by Councilmember Melendez. We are adjourned at 8:51 p.m.